SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Engineering, Medical and Health Sciences, Management, Dental, Science and Humanities, Law, Agriculture Sciences, Hotel Management. Admissions open.
When you live in a fast-moving, ever-changing world, life brings forth unlimited possibilities. Yours to explore, excite, enjoy, educate, evaluate, and elucidate with elan. Never stop moving forward with Darwin Platform Group. Darwin Platform Group, the visionaries.
ThyroCare, the trust, the truth.
Hello and a very warm welcome to day 2 of Business Today Mind Rush. We are very delighted to be bringing this event to you virtually. This is our first virtual edition of Business Today Mind Rush, the biggest business conclave there is in the country. I'm Shweta Punj, Deputy Editor with India Today magazine and your host for the day. It's been a tough year for everyone, but it is here that we see how the best CEOs stand head and shoulders above the rest. We'd like to thank our presenting sponsor, SRM University, our conglomerate partner, Darwin Platform Group of Companies, and our healthcare partner, ThyroCare.
Unwinding is reading. I mean, I love to read magazines and books and newspapers, and of course also Business Today. Do play some tennis. So on the weekends, I have a game of tennis with friends. But now in the pandemic, I have stopped it, and instead I do a fairly rigorous walking in my house itself for about an hour each day. And so that's fundamental, and then spend time with my wife. The hills are always my favorite, because I had an upbringing in the hills because my father used to work in the border roads. My most luxurious possession, I would really count, and it's luxury from the point of view of today's day and age, is the warmth and trustworthiness of the relationships that I've had. I think that for me is the most precious. I wouldn't call it luxurious. I would call it precious. So the relationships, the trustworthiness, the respect, the transparency, and the fact that people do trust me with issues in their lives which is beyond work. Is something that keeps me going. So really, the material stuff hasn't got me ever, and it's unlikely to get me now in my current state. But it's more investing time in people and relationships that I would call precious. Some might call it a luxury.
We start off the day with a fireside chat on different perspectives. This is a time when older businesses have had to think on their feet to change systems and processes. But that's what most startups have been doing all along. To understand the differences in managing an established concern as opposed to a startup, we have with us Dr. Sangeeta Reddy, Joint Managing Director, Apollo Hospitals, in conversation with Mr. Ashish Shah, COO and co-founder, Pepper Fry. Moderating the discussion is Rajeev Dubey, Editor, Business Today, and Managing Editor, Business TV Today Network.
Welcome to this Business Today Mind Rush panel discussion on different perspectives, where we bring together a new age business and a traditional business to try and understand whether they do things any differently. Welcome, Dr. Reddy and Ashish. This will be a kind of rapid fire, so I will ask the questions to both of you. We'll try and understand how your perspectives are any different. So let me start with the first, try and understand what were the upsides and the downsides of the pandemic to you, Dr. Reddy?
The upside is clearly that it re-energized the society's thought process about health. It was never before has health been so center stage. from government to industry to homes to society, everybody was thinking about health. So I think long term, that realization of the importance of health is a huge upside. The fact that it accelerated so much of our digital adoption and our thinking around the fact that the world is, so connected and we can do things very differently, I think is a huge upside. The downside, is the fact that genuinely we lost lives. We lost, and while at Apollo we strive to bring the best of science and medicine, we stayed connected with the world because no care protocol that anybody's talking about has really been completely validated. So you had to be nimble, you had to be agile, you had to stay connected. And we did a lot of those things, but the downside was that it was a sweeping pandemic. It took time for people to understand. And today, our mortality rates in our acute patients is under 1%, and overall it's under, 1.5%. But it is a sad and very, significant fact. Worse also is that I think people who had the problem and were denied care, the government's done a fantastic job, so those numbers were small. The other downside, I believe, is for the economy at large, because people have lost jobs. Women especially have been displaced even more than men. And I think one of the other things it showed us was really the fact that many, many members of our society are so vulnerable. And it's important for us to do something about them.
Ashish?
From upside standpoint, I think perhaps the world was moving too fast. I think this was a big pause. Sometimes it's important to, stop and think where we are heading, all of us. We say that, if you're moving too fast, the only way to stop is to fall down, right? And therefore, I think this was a big pause. I think all of us took time to understand what had kind of hit us. And I think in my mind, it changed lives. I think this time would be called, pre-COVID and post-COVID times, I think forever, in generations to come. So from that standpoint, I think, just basic understanding about your health, chalking down your priorities once again, redefining them. I think that were some, major changes. Frankly, for me, it was a very, life-changing moment. Spending so much time again, in home with your kids, with family, had not happened for a long time. From business standpoint, obviously, digital adoption has gone up significantly. We were hit for 3-4 months really badly. For a startup, sometimes you have a doubt whether you will even be able to come back, right? If business is not happening for 3-4 months, you might actually never come back. Fortunately, from that standpoint, because of digital adoption, things came back really strongly for us. Things are back to normal. We are back to our pre-COVID times. So from business standpoint, from economy standpoint, I think things are coming back really well now. Obviously, really bad times we have seen. I think there are a lot of migrants who have come to, urban areas to work. I think they were, caught off guard. I think for them to spend time alone at home without any help, etc. I think it was very difficult time, especially at our end. We used to call everyone who used to stay alone to check about their health, whether they need something, etc. or not. But I think these were really tough times.
Dr. Reddy, how has it changed your business? Did it make any drastic change to your business in any way?
So the immediate and super drastic change was clearly that, many people who needed care could not come, did not come because they were scared. There was the lockdown. There was the fear that if you go into the hospital, you'll get COVID because of other patients being treated there. And we had isolated the COVID wards, completely taken care of them separately. But surgical work, just didn't happen for a few months. So that was a drastic reduction. The exciting part of it was that, we've been working with telemedicine for 20 years now. But during this period, doctors just adopted because online consultations became really the norm. And where we used to do maybe, 1,000, 2,000 teleconsult a day for far-flung areas, we suddenly, crossed 10, 15,000 teleconsults a day because all our doctors went online. And I think that behavior change is something which is here to stay. Of course, patients have started coming back. The physical touch is critical, but new models are emerging, and it's using technology and keeping customer convenience very much at the center of what we do. So that transformation piece has happened.
Ashish, how has it
Yeah,
changed your
quite
business?
similarly, when people are spending a lot more time at their homes, they realize that perhaps that sofa needs to be changed, or when they're now getting together at home to have their lunch, they now need a dining table to for the family to have lunch together. So from that standpoint, some of these categories, study tables, sofas, lounges, dining tables, they have grown significantly, for us. As you spend more time, people need more furniture at their home. So from business standpoint, I think we are doing, the comeback was really great. We are doing much more than even the pre-COVID levels. The other important thing is a lot of furniture in India used to be done by carpenters. They would come to your home, make furniture, etc. That business is not happening at all. The entire business has moved to ready-made, furniture business, and we are in the business of ready-made furniture, and therefore, all of that benefit is coming our way at this point in time. Retail, I think, is taking some time to come back.
Dr. Reddy, what is the new normal for you?
For me or for my company?
For you.
Okay, so the new normal is that, I don't necessarily have to be physically in the office. Even though every single day I went into the hospital, and over the course of last year, I was also President FICCI. So, I think that you can technically do everything from home on a call, but there is a great value to your presence. So I actually made sure that I was physically there, even more than ever before. I walked the floors, I did the rounds, I've visited a COVID ward, so that more than once, multiple times, went into the COVID ward fully masked, so that our team knew that any risk that we would put them in, we were willing to bear that risk or share that risk. In terms of home, etc., the new normal is fantastic in that we just saw our family and our children so much more. In fact, they saw less of me because I was so much at work, but the ability to have the kids at home has been fantastic.
And for the business, is it any different, new normal?
So clearly it is the physical digital as a seamless continuum, which encompasses the consumer and matches the speed of his requirement or her requirement and her thought process. That is really the new normal. It is, we've read the book before that the patient will see you now, and it was before all about the doctor. Now it's clearly about the customer.
Ashish?
No, very clearly, to Dr. Reddy's point, I think, as you start up, you exercise a lot of control on your business. You want people, all of them, actually all 400 of them, to be sitting in front of you, right? And I think that changed significantly. This time also gave us, a time to step back. We got together as a group, our management team. We said, let's, chalk out what we want to do for future. We have been doing Pepperfry for 9 years now. The business moves at a certain pace. This year is going to be new. It is about many new things. I think this would not have happened if we did not have time to think through what we want to do. So therefore, action packed only because of COVID. I think the opportunity is there, and the intent is now very high.
And so, Raju, very quickly, one more thing. I think in the new normal, we will not take 4 flights and 5 flights a week.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now that we've discovered this, none of us are going to go back to the crazy pace that we used to do.
Yes.
And, like Ashish said, the focus will not be on the time driven. It will be on the results. So I've started a new thing, from the new year, where I do a good morning to an operations staff.
Awesome.
Okay.
And do a walkthrough with them just using their phone. And this way, I'm literally visiting 2 hospitals a day.
How do you engage with the consumer, Dr. Reddy?
So, our typical thing, and this is something Chairman started many, many years ago, is that you just do rounds every day.
Okay.
And so all our corporate offices, we don't have standalone corporate offices except one. So our CEOs and all of us are located in the hospital buildings. So you walk through the wards or you walk through the outpatients every single day and you feel the pulse. And that's where, someone will stop you in the corridor, or I can stop near the elevator and ask someone how you're doing. And then I do a more formal round. And I was missing the fact that I couldn't do those everywhere else, which is why we got this virtual round idea. So that is one. Of course, there's a digital connect. We have a very evolved CRM. We look at Google ratings very clearly and continuously, and every center is actually rated based on customer feedback. We also do a lot of, this thing on the web. So we look at social media communication, language, and what are people saying about us. And this is all collated into the NPS, overall NPS score, which happens unit by unit, department by department. So the combination of physical and continuous in touch has been part of our culture from the very beginning. And that continues. You're just using new tools, but you know very clearly that you're here for the patient.
Ashish?
Yeah, so quite similarly, since we are a digital business, we were always very, very connected to customers, on social media. That is perhaps our way of working, and therefore what we strive to do is how do we meet them more frequently, more physically, right? And we do something called, so we have two programs. One is called customer meetups, where starting from an assistant manager to the CEO of the company, we go and make deliveries for 2 straight days to our customers across markets. We also do something called customer call-ups, where everyone is on the CS floor and they would actually take up calls that are coming from the customer. So when when the category team is on the call and trying to understand what was the problem with the product with the customer, I think that brings a lot of insights. So these are, we actually strive to go more physical because, since there is no face to the company, we like to go and meet customers, more often.
Okay. Dr. Reddy, how do you keep employee morale high?
Number one is, I think that just by the nature of where we are and the work we do in healthcare, doing your work itself is inspiring. So, and if we can continuously reiterate the connect between the work they do and the impact they have on lives, that takes care of most of the motivation. And we genuinely search for people who are able to make that connection. But besides that, we do a bunch of things. I mean, we're called the Apollo family. We connect very often. From chairman, all of us, we've done over 3 meetings with all our senior leadership. But then we've had multiple meetings with every level. So there was a nursing call, there was a doctor's call, so lots of this has happened. But as a culture as well, from birthdays being celebrated to families being supported. And these are initiatives that have grown over the last 36 years. An Apollo person knows that, that you are part of family. It goes beyond a job. And I believe that is their biggest motivating factor.
Okay. Ashish, how do you keep employee morale high?
So again, for a young company, one of the most, one of the biggest promises that we make to our employees is that, we are there for them, and we take a lot of personal interest in people's career. That is our biggest promise to, our employees. We, whosoever works at Pepperfry, we tell them that in 1 year, you get 3 years of experience. Their jobs are very enriching. We take personal interest, like I said. There are workshops that Amrish and me have done, starting from, let's say MBTI scores to Belbin to, basically creating awareness amongst, all employees who are more than assistant managers and above. We actually go and conduct those, workshops. A lot of focus on training and development. It's important for a young organization to create a cult, right? And, when we had started, for every month, when we hit our target, we used to go out and party. So, for the first 24 months, every 30th, 31st, we would go out and party. And, while work is very intense, there is a lot of fun around things. We also believe a lot in transparency and communication, regular updates. We follow a fantastic operating rhythm, starting from doing our, operating council meeting where heads of departments would meet every week, to forecasting meetings every fortnight, to management team meetings every month. Then we have a once in a year Goa offsite. If you have resigned, let's say in August at Pepperfry, you would negotiate that you should be allowed to, kind of attend that offsite. It is a very big deal at Pepperfry. We do awards which are very coveted. These are called Employee of the Year awards, given only to 2, 3, 4 people out of 400 people. And therefore, there is an entire skit around it, it's a very big event.
What's your idea of future readiness, Dr. Reddy?
So, it's so many things, but I would just say a continued closeness to all stakeholders. Customer definitely, but doctors are a critical stakeholder. Our vendors are critical. So continuous closeness and an alignment with stakeholders. A deep technology passion and focus. So we've always brought in the latest technology in terms of machines. From the first CT scan, the latest MRI, now the proton. So we always did that. But now we're looking at deep IT. So there's AI and ML driven initiatives happening across the organization where we're trying to create a whole new story around automation. And with that comes, the change in skill sets, etc. So IT is a huge area for us. The other one, I think, is a focus on outcomes for patients, outcomes or results in every area. And the fact that it's not just knowledge which is power, but applied knowledge. We know that small shifts in behavior, lifestyle, medication can avert a crisis. Small readiness patterns. If you come to us with a stroke within 30 minutes, you can take a clotbuster therapy and walk home in a day, rather than being an invalid because you came 2 hours late. So this is actionable insights put into the ecosystem to impact and, help the lives of people. That is really, our whole mindset right now.
Okay. Ashish, your idea of future readiness?
You see, the way we look at our businesses for every startup, we are kind of 6 to 9 months ahead of, the next person, right? And that's the lead time that we have. And therefore, for someone like us, we have to be constantly on the treadmill. I think we strongly believe that in 3 to 4 years time, the way furniture and home products are bought in this country is going to change significantly. People would not go to stores; they would not perhaps also come online, and perhaps augmented reality, virtual reality would be the way to go. Right? How do you get customers to a small 400 square feet store and give them glasses so that they can really see the furniture in their homes to make a purchase decision, right? So this is one area that we are focusing significantly on. We have already taken some initial steps. Most of the furniture available on Pepperfry is on 3D models already, and therefore now taking it to AR and VR should be easy. So this is going to completely change the game, I think, in 3-4 years, and therefore we want to ensure that we are the first ones to deliver to this promise. The second is a lot of focus on branded furniture. We are in a business where brands do not matter, okay, and therefore there is no premium to what you're buying. Therefore, we believe that the biggest opportunity for us is how do we make Indians buy branded furniture, okay, and that is going to be our focus over the next 3 to 4 years. We have around 10 house brands of our own. We call them, our private labels are called house brands. We want to see how we take those house brands to consumers now through shops, through offline, online experience. So that's going to be the second big focus. The third big area here is, we have always believed that customers are not online or offline. Customers are customers. If sometimes you buy a book on Amazon and sometimes you would pick a book from Crossword at the airport, right? And therefore, being available to customers at all touch points is very important. We'll continue to open our stores. We are already 65 stores. We want to be 200 stores by end of next year. We want to be great on mobile. We want to be great on web, app, mobile phones, etc. So all form factors are important. Very important, stat for you here, 65% of the traffic that comes on Pepperfry and the transactions that happen on Pepperfry actually happens from mobile phones, right? And no one would believe that, category like ours could be bought on mobile phones. So that is going to be key focus area, 3 very important levers for growth.
Okay. Your concept of fun at work, Dr. Reddy.
So, we do some really interesting and fun things. But for me, when you get a new idea, I get a lot of fun and pleasure in that. So we do all, we have games, they do songs, there's Christmas celebration, there's every festival we try to do. Diwali is particularly pretty because the nurses take sweets and diyas into every area. Christmas is always well decorated. So all those are fun. But I think the biggest fun is when we get together in these small meetings, and have every level of person, and then there's a eureka moment. So I get a lot of pleasure in seeing that happen.
Ashish?
Yeah, for us, the fun starts from the fact that, we should be, okay making fun about yourselves, right? And, not taking yourselves too seriously is something that, we try to practice every day, because most of the fun in life comes from that, right? How do you talk, funny about yourself, right? Apart from that, many actions, related to fun. We recently moved into a new office. This is the first standalone Pepperfry office that we were now able to build in 9 years. We believe in intelligent fun. So, if you look at the way the floors are defined in this office, one floor is called 42, the other one is called 9.81, the third is called 5. So, there is a lot of intelligent fun element already in the office. Like I said, we party a lot. The first day when we, Amrish and me got together to build Pepperfry, we said that we'll build our company on 3 values: Indian, honest, and fun. Right, because we knew that this journey is going to be intense, and we have had our own share of challenges, but I think we overcome them because of the fun that we've had with employees till now.
Okay, so the last question before we close is about the 3 takeaways maybe from each of your businesses. Dr. Reddy, if you'd like to start.
So I think not just our business, but I think every sector is changing and evolving. And so the fact that change is constant is a cliche, but is a true reality. And so we need to be ready for that. Number 2, again, I think is very important for all, but I think the pace of acceleration of the application of new science into our sector is just going to be better and better. And the fact that, the world could create a vaccine in under 12 months. If we start applying that to all other areas, can we cure cancer? Can we find a way to solve your knee without a massive open surgery? What are the new realms? So the use of science and technology. And finally, it's all about human beings ultimately. So the customer is not a customer. He or she is a human being. The employee is not an employee. He is a human being. So I think that aspect of finding another dimension to connect with, to inspire, to challenge. So if we can connect with the patient very differently, maybe their fight for, to survive or for cancer is going to be very differently. So finding that, because everyone is a human being. These, I think, are the 3 for me and my office.
Any takeaways, Dr. Reddy, from Ashish's business?
Oh, lots. I think any of the older businesses who are not constantly watching young startups are missing something very valuable. I think their speed, their focus. I mean, we would be very happy. We opened 4 hospitals this year. We opened 20 clinics. And I'm hearing him saying 65 stores to 250 stores. So the speed and the focus that this sector has is something which is a true learning for all of us.
Ashish, your takeaways and any takeaway from Dr. Reddy's business?
Yeah, I'll start with my takeaways. I think the fact that the healthcare business in my mind is social service. I think even when we had started, we said that everyone who's associated with us, be it merchant, customers, employees, we want to do good for them. Do good for everyone was our motto. I think Dr. Reddy is living that, breathing it every day. I think while you are building a business, if you are able to also create such kind of social impact, I think it is very inspiring. It's something that we would want to do in our lives. When they make money, you don't need much money to lead a great life in India. And beyond that money, you would invest in new businesses. When wealth creation happens, I tell my son, you are in a great cycle, because all the people who are now billionaires, they're going to invest money for the next 10 years, and perhaps more billionaires would happen. And I think we are in a great cycle, right? So from that standpoint, I remember, 98, 99, when I used to tell my parents that I want to start something of my own, they will ask me, where is the money, right? I think in the last 10 years, what changed was that money was available. If you have the intent, if you have a plan, then, money happens, right? People were willing to put in monies on you. So, which never happened in the past. So totally, thoroughly agree to what you're saying. These are great times to be in.
Absolutely.
from business standpoint, like I mentioned earlier, speed is of essence here, especially in our business. If you are sleeping for 6 months, you might not have a business. Very conscious of the fact that we have 6 to 9 months where we want to make the change. Therefore, constantly innovating, constantly doing new things is something that we take very seriously. The second thing is, which we are very conscious about when we build businesses, that one should not play God, when it comes to customers. There is a lot of, the fundamental premise of an online business, especially our business, is great variety and great price. We do not like to make choices on behalf of customers, right? And therefore never, go away from that proposition. Provide them variety, they would choose what they want, right? And therefore, when I say don't play God, it also means that, data in my mind is everything. While we need to move with speed, planning before you take your first step is very important. Often startups make that mistake. They just plunge in and without planning. I think there is a lot of value for planning, and we do not move an inch before we have plans in place, right? Right. So that's, second important thing in our business. The third is, like I mentioned earlier, customers are customers. Do not classify them. Manage the top of the funnel. Reach out to your customer wherever they are present in, through activation, through online, offline, does not matter, right? And that's the proposition that you should continue, sir.
Dr. Reddy, Ashish, one of the most interesting conversations I've had. Thank you for being such a sport, and thanks so much for your time.
Thyrocare, the trust, the truth.
Weekends, I like to exercise. I like to play golf. Sports have always been a big part of my life, so that's always a good way to unwind. And it used to be different sports at different times in life. Right now, I'm a bit more focused on golf because it also works with the pandemic and outdoors and all of that stuff. And then the other thing is I like to sort of catch up with entertainment, news, read some books, watch movies, TV shows, those kind of things. So that's really sort of my unwinding and entertainment. Biggest part of health in my mind is really, I've realized as I've aged, is that it's really much more about eating right. So I focus a lot on what I eat. And then of course, some amount of exercise and a little bit of yoga. Those are the two things that keep me going. But really, I think it's much more about eating right than actually spending, exercising. I think if I find myself I eat right, I think exercising and everything else becomes easier after that. I am not a big shopping person, to be honest. The most indulgent things I buy are usually for my wife, and it was actually our anniversary not long ago, so I ended up buying stuff for her, which is what she deserves, and actually it's my pleasure to buy things for her. So really, I'm not a very indulgent or a big shopping person. The things that I spend money are things which make me more automated. Not surprisingly, I like to, own a good phone, good technology, digital technology, a nice computer, those type of things which are important. Maybe, TV, those type of things. But really nothing very indulgent, to be honest. I'm a person who doesn't really need a lot in terms of those things. It's just not something that is my forte. Probably I spend more money on a golf course and buying golf clubs. That's probably the most indulgent thing that I do.
SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Engineering, Medical and Health Sciences, Management, Dental, Science and Humanities, Law, Agriculture Sciences, Hotel Management. Admissions open.
When you live in a fast-moving, ever-changing world, life brings forth unlimited possibilities. Yours to explore, excite, enjoy, educate, evaluate, and elucidate with Elan. Never stop moving forward with Darwin Platform Group. Darwin Platform Group, the visionaries.
Thyrocare, the trust, the truth.
Our next panel discussion, managing work from home workforce. Most of us have been working from home for almost 10 months. So how does a large organization with thousands of people manage to run operations smoothly? That's what we are discussing in the next panel discussion on managing WFH workforce. I'd like to invite my colleague Ajita Shashidhar, Deputy Editor of Business Today, to introduce the panel.
Welcome to the 2021 edition of the Business Today Mind Rush. In the last 9 to 10 months, working from home has become a way of life. Brands have also started encashing on it. We see apparel brands launching work from home collection, footwear brands launching work from home collection. But we all know working from home has not been particularly easy for many of us. So today we have some of the finest HR minds from the country who are going to talk to us about managing a work from home workforce. So let me introduce you to our panel. We have Mr. Rajesh Uppal, Senior Executive Director, HR and IT, Maruti Suzuki. Mr. Raj Narayanan, CHRO, the Titan Company. We have Anuradha Razdan, Executive Director, Human Resources, Hindustan Unilever. We have R. Mahalakshmi, CHRO, Mondelez India. And finally, we have Rajkamal Vempati, the CHRO of Axis Bank. Welcome all of you to this panel discussion, and thank you so much for kind of sparing some time for this. I would first ask Mr. Rajesh Uppal. It'll be interesting to know how you have reimagined your HR policies, in order to kind of fit into this new hybrid regime, wherein you have a few people coming into work and a few people working from home. How are you kind of striking that balance, and especially for a manufacturing company like Maruti, where one can't imagine anyone working from home? How different is it?
See, manufacturing traditionally has been thought that you will work from office and all the IT and consulting company can be work from anywhere and all. That has been a culture around and all. But I think what pandemic has taught, and rather I've seen the opportunities in pandemic, are that hybrid mode has been accepted as a form of working in the industry. And though manufacturing, you need to be on the shop floor to do that. And for that, I think a lot of modification on our work lines with proper shielding and proper masking and all those things around, so that you can manufacture safely. But the policies and all to make sure that hybrid way of working works in a company like us has been an area which has been worked in all other non-manufacturing area, whether it's R&D, whether it is supply chain, whether it is corporate function, or maybe IT and everywhere. I think that has been accepted as a norm. And to maintain social distancing, we had till now worked on only 33% people coming to office any day, and rest of the people should work from home. But more than that, I think our HR policies have been tweaked to manage this per se and all. And very clearly, the whole thought process is that we should have productivity and more, I think, effective way of working than really by a hybrid mode.
Coming to you, Anuradha, how are you managing your hybrid workforce?
There are 2 or 3 things that I want to talk about. One is what I call care, and across all our factory sites, our factory leadership teams took ownership for each one of our 12,000 blue-collar employees. And we made sure that each of these employees and their families were contacted at least once a week. And the purpose of the call was just to say, are you okay? To check on their well-being, on their physical, mental health well-being. And I think that was the first thing which really gave our employees and their families a lot of support. The second thing we did was work with the communities. Because one of the biggest things and biggest issues was that the employees faced fear of social boycott. When they came to work and when they went back, there was fear that they would be treated as outcasts, as people who would potentially bring back the infection. And therefore, we worked in educating. We have a program called Prabhat, where across each of our manufacturing sites, we work with the communities around. And this time, the focus was educating them on hygiene, sanitation, giving them free rations because many had lost employment. Of course, giving them products for cleansing and hygiene. And the third thing is what I call capability. Because the one thing we could not do was get employees together in large groups on shop floor meetings, etc. And so we have an app which luckily for us had gone live early in 2019. And basically, this is a one-stop shop for all our blue-collar employees. And very quickly, we use this as the one-stop shop for them to have a small by digital capability program. So almost 25 or 30,000 hours of capability building. So a combination of care, working with the communities and building capability digitally is what I believe has really helped our people thrive and give that productivity.
Mahalakshmi, if you would like to now come in and tell us about, how have you managed, how you're managing this hybrid workforce, because some people are still working out of home and some are coming to work. It's not good. Coordination would be a challenge many a time. So how are you kind of making it seamless?
One is really starting with questioning our own mindsets in terms of what needs a physical co-location. Secondly, really equipping leaders to be effective and inspiring, in this setting. And the thing that I don't think we've perfected is hybrid, because right now it's remote work, and there are core teams which are out there in the field, and there are the non-core teams who are perhaps predominantly remote working. But imagine, a teleconference where 3 people are in a conference room and 3 are sitting remotely, ensuring that we don't ignore the ones who are dialed in, I think these are things that perhaps we need to sensitize and kind of get in a little more. We are in the midst of launching what we call a book your seat app, because we are very clear that we'll never get to 100%, back to work. It'll always be hybrid. So how do we really optimize physical space? How do we really ensure people book a seat? And again, those things of I have a cabin, I have a fixed workstation, all of that is getting challenged. And I think it's a fantastic time for us to test our ability to reimagine our policies and our approaches to work as we get into playing in this hybrid world.
Coming to you, Mr. Rajnarayan, it would be interesting to know how you are reimagining your HR policies. How are you inspiring your employees to improve their productivity?
With this pandemic, while there is this whole work from home scene, there's a lot of anxiety. So how do we handle, apart from whatever Rajesh, Anu and Mahalakshmi said, I think the issue of anxiety is one. So what we did, for example, was the early days of COVID and when it was becoming at the peak, we said it's important for people to admit to the fact that and go test first to admit to the fact that they've got COVID, because there was a social stigma in the early days. So we said any employee or their family member, if they tested positive for COVID and if they required hospitalization, God forbid, we would pick up the entire tab outside of whatever insurance policy was available. Now this, in effect, is not a very large thing, but that kind of shift that it made in people's minds, the impact that had on people's minds in terms of that, hey, the company's got my back if I get this illness. Now, there was a lot of anxiety around the illness. On the other end, folks who are working from home, their anxiety that, hey, is what I'm doing from home, is it as counted as when I'm working from office, right? The fear of A, missing out, and B, being missed out, right? So how do you handle that? So I think what we did do was, okay, we said from an appraisals perspective, from goal setting perspective, we said it's important to bring in people and strengthen the team feeling and the feeling of participation.
During this period, I myself have written a lot about work from home and spoken to all of you actually. So, and one of the things which came out very strongly was, this feeling of insecurity amongst a lot of people who are working out from home. This feeling of going unnoticed and not being heard. And this was especially more in the case of women employees. So, Rajkamal, if you could come in and tell me as to what have you been telling your employees, and what have you been doing to kind of bridge these fears that many employees are having.
Mine will be a contrarian view, so okay. Everybody has come from a manufacturing setup. I didn't have the luxury, or my larger workforce didn't have the luxury because we were essential workers. In terms of anxieties, whole host of them. Everybody was on lockdown, but our guys were really working. Our teams were out there in the front line, managing the conveyance, managing challenges. And I think what really helped us is we did one thing, empowered the local leaders. What we understand in crisis and others, in good leadership engines, actually you should trust what's happening on the front lines and ensure that people will do right by the community, by their teams. The biggest thing to manage anxiety, actually, we did it a little differently. We had an appraisal cycle in April. We continued with the appraisal cycle, and that ensured that people could say that, remotely work can happen. Even in the toughest time, things can happen, and regular performance processes. So we paid out bonuses, we did promotions, everything remotely. So early on in April, we released our document saying that we are going hybrid. And that was a statement of intent. For me, actually, this hybrid workforce is an opportunity in a big way. And what I would want to stress is, fundamentally 3-4 learnings that we had. First is work can happen remote, but work needs to be planned better. Have a cadence to it. And in the work part, can you capsulize it to make it more skill intense, get the skill part out rather than the aggregator. And there are other transactions that, how can you kind of get it out? So that was another one. Third is the role of the manager. Yes, trust is critical, but also building of social capital through the process. And how do you monitor, people? But the other learning that we've recognized is the learning roles, I call them, the young people, the raw talent who comes in. They definitely need that social networking, some kind of assimilation for them to deliver their best. The fourth part is, yes, you've got to reshape and reimagine not only the workplaces, the policies, but even how we work, right? But I think what we need to think about the human interaction, the humanness of an office. How do you retain it? How do you get that nurtured and fostered? That will be the critical part. And the last part is how, as an organization, both from an HR, I think the biggest challenge to all the reshaping is from HR itself. Our HR managers, when we interview, how we get reviews done and how are we coaching the managers? Do we really think one template, or are we able to think multiple templates? Has been the biggest learning.
Coming to you, Anuradha, how have you managed anxieties and insecurities, especially of people who are continuing to work from home now? How are you managing that? What are you telling them?
The first thing is that we really stepped up what I call the listening posts in the organization. We took disproportionate effort to make sure that people felt listened to, like everybody else. Whether it was, organized daily meetings and check-ins in the beginning, pulse surveys, which we said every week initially, and then a fortnight and every month. We had informal conversations. The second thing we did was we sort of recast our approach to well-being in what we call well-being for all. We've always approached well-being as, in a very holistic way: physical, mental, emotional, purposeful, because we feel that each of these dimensions has a play in the overall well-being of an individual. But this time we said that let's have a very segmented and targeted approach to mental well-being and other aspects of well-being. So we have 5 sets of groups. So an employee, a regular employee, an employee who has actually been affected either by the infection or some kind of trauma or some kind of upheaval in their life, a line manager, a leader of large teams, and so on and so forth. So 5 different groups. Then, like I said, it's really the power of one and individual customization. We quickly created what we called a simple questionnaire in the beginning, which we now call the Wellbeing Quotient, which allows you to look at for yourself what aspects of your well-being and your life and work are you doing well, and where is it that you need a little bit of help. So the Wellbeing Quotient was again a tool that allowed us to create individual plans. Finally, we already had a sort of an employee assistance program or a helpline which was accessible to all our employees. But that was not enough. I think the sense of loneliness, the sense of, making people feel that it's okay to say that I'm feeling lonely. It's okay to say that, no problem is too small. There is really no boundary on the conversations that have come up and the kind of feelings that people have had. And therefore, it really gave us impetus to create what we call mental health champions in the organization. So these are not psychiatrists or counselors, but these are employees like you and me who have a little more understanding of what Unilever's view on well-being is, and are sort of people whom you can go to as the first port of call, people who are willing to be a listening post for you.
So any requests that any of you got from your employees, which was kind of, not run-of-the-mill requests that any of you got, it'll be interesting to hear from you. Mr. Uppal, anything different which you had not expected from any of your employees that came up, which was kind of funny rather, and did you meet with it?
There were many, I think, work from home, especially people traveled home at remote locations around, and especially low connectivity is all that and all. And for us, it's a very peculiar situation because we have a lot of R&D engineers and they need, a big screen and trackballs and all to do their work in office. So that becomes a very tough thing to do, to work on a small screen at home and do the designing work and all. So providing that infrastructure at home with all connectivity around is something which was first request came in and all, which in pandemic, taking help from the local administration, we try to do that and all so that they can work from home and still be effective.
Maha, any requests that you got from any of your employees which you had kind of never expected?
I wouldn't call it a request, but it was a reverse request we made to employees to say, dudes, let's not, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon, and it is not something wherein, the human body, if you take it completely for granted and do night and day, with all the lovely intent that we have, for our work and the passion for the company, it's important that we draw the line, and we draw that boundary, so we actually, we've spoken about it, with you as well, Ajita, the remote work commitments. So we actually said, look, it's very important for you to really call out what is your boundary, and it'll be very different for, like Anu was saying, for one person versus the other. Someone prefers to finish the day early so that, they can be with the child when the child is back from school. And there's someone else who has, other accountabilities at home to manage, and therefore they want to start late. So please put in. And so we said, look, very simply on your calendar, just block off the hours and define your core working hours by blocking off the time. So earlier, 9 to 5:30 and everything else was gray. We allowed a flexibility on Outlook wherein you could define what is your work hours, and in the middle of it, block off your detox hour, lunch hour, whatever else you want to do. So a very simple thing. And two, let's not deprioritize. So, we have a global purpose called snacking made right, because we're a snacking company. So we said, look, it's very important. What are you snacking your mind with, So our wellness agenda, we took home with, taking it digital, and using apps, etc.
So has the work from home concept improved productivity? I mean, that's my question to all of you, but it'll be nice if we can start with Mr. Rajnarayan. Has work from home helped in increasing productivity?
Certainly, I think it has, immediate answer. Why? I think, one, the meetings, for example, as simple as on the one end, the simple part, which is meetings largely, I've noticed, start on time and end on time. People's calendars are far more packed, right? And because of the ease at which you can actually go from one meeting to the other, right? And I think, therefore, that's one. The third thing is, I think, meetings tend to be a lot more, I'm staying with meetings for a minute, tend to be a lot more to the point. The fact that connect is far easier has certainly lifted productivity.
Rajkamal, what's your view? Has work from home helped in increasing productivity?
In the short term, yes, but it has given rise to a lot of other issues. Fatigue is one. Mental, not emotional anxieties have led to also within families managing for depression. It's been worst for teenage kids, not just because I'm a teenage daughter's parent, but it's really been tough on the kids, especially given the fact that they've not been able to meet, mingle, or do their activities. Their sense of identity, which is so critical, is based on many experiences that they get in the physical space. That's not been there. Second is, parents with young children are really struggling. People have not been taking leave, right? And in the issue of ki kare kya, what would I do? So in a sense, it's paradoxical. Work for a lot of people has given them purpose to tide through this crisis, because you're not thinking about the crisis all the time.
Has work from home improved productivity, or has there been has productivity levels come down, especially in a sector like yours?
So work from home is one, but I think end of the day it's going to be hybrid. So that with hybrid, I think overall effectivity will improve, and you'll get best of both. So the breaking the whole monotonous of working from home or working online and coming to office. I think what has happened now is, and since I think what we do is, we are getting right now around 33% people into office, but we are making sure that you do based on your own convenience, and so you come Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, or something like that. You plan yourself your whole working, so that you get best of both. And at end of the day, I think it's going to settle down to a hybrid mode of working, where you have both the options available to you, and you plan your work accordingly to make sure that as an organization you are more effective. And that's something which is coming up to be a ideal way of working going forward. And I think we are working on institutionalizing this whole process, so that this is the way it works, and support with all the policies and support with all the procedures around to do that. I think that's something which is becoming an effective way of working.
Okay. Great. So remote working, from whatever I have read and written about, is leading, has widened the talent pool greatly. So, a lot of people, a lot of companies have started hiring from tier 2, tier 3 markets and things like that. Anuradha, I would like to know from you, I would like to hear from you as to, have there been any changes in the way you hire, the way you hire in your placement strategy?
What have we done differently in terms of our hiring strategy? I think, of course, there has been a leap to an almost all digital model. We've moved to digital hiring. And of course, early, a lot of our engagements with campuses used to be physical, used to be face-to-face. This year, we've done 100% digital pivot. And then, of course, digital selection. Digital selection has always been a part of our process. But one of the things that allowed us was, I had the power of listening to 100 interviews. some of our best leaders. So what we could see was really listen carefully. So what are the things that we do well? What are the things that we don't check for? And in many ways, this kind of digital listening, learning allows us to fine tune and improve our processes, which we didn't have earlier. You couldn't sit in on a physical interview, but now with so much data, you can see insights. You can see what are the kind of things that we see repeatably for our strengths. Where do we need to cover for gaps? So those are some of the things we've done to tweak our talent attraction and selection process.
Interesting. Maha, would you like to add to what Anuradha said in terms of your placement strategy? Is it any different now from what it was earlier?
I think there are just perhaps two things that I would say from a hiring standpoint. One is, with geography becoming history, I think we are very clear now on a bunch of roles. So we've sat and identified roles which are truly location agnostic, which don't really need to be based out of a certain location. And therefore, the talent pool that's available for us to hire has gotten widened. And therefore, we are able to tap into a wider pool. I think the second one, which is really the biggest challenge, is really how do we give that signature Mondelez experience to people who are joining us at this time. It is about ensuring that they get the business well. It's about they understand the work ethos well, culture as we shape it and as we continue shaping it, they get to experience that culture in a virtual way, and I think in that sense, to my mind, the reality is this is it, this is the way it's going to be. It's important for all of us, whether it's HR professionals or business leaders, to just adapt, so productivity will be important, engagement will be important, culture will need to be shaped.
I think just one last question before we wrap it up. One gets to read a lot about a lot of concerns about security, data security, and privacy issues, which has kind of cropped up due to work from home, with more and more employees working from home. Rajkamal, I would like to know from you as to what are you doing to bridge that?
So one is, you asked the right question, because for the longest time we said work from home is not possible in a bank because we have data concerns. But for me, the biggest learning out of this is if you co-create solutions with the risk guy sitting there and technology guy, solutions will come through. So 2-3 things we've done. We've got the technology basis right in terms of having those patches, etc. Even for the remote workers who are on contractual arrangements, there are technology enablers. Invest in those, but fundamentally also think through your processes. And because we're in the business of risk, before implementing all of this, we ran it through the risk and cross-functional team so that we are not in for surprises, and we've had answers to most. But having said that, it has to be practical, right? Ultimately, we are in the business of trust. And in short, one is the part of the data that is available on your desktop, but also the data that is available to, your kids are sitting there, your family is listening into your conversations. All of that is happening, and you've got to be okay with that. Only thing is reiteration of the code of conduct and some of the data issues. So you need to just do that. But beyond that, I think the currency of trust hasn't changed, will not change. I think it'll only get reiterated and reinforced much more.
How does it work in the retail sector, Mr. Rajnarayan?
Specifically on staying on this data security issue, it's not something which is deeply impacted just because of this, in our opinion. But yes, this is one of the factors, and data security is always something which there is it's a concern for most of us who deal with large sets of data. And I think it's a continuous process of looking at how do you protect yourself. And this is one facet. Yeah, I think that's being taken care of.
It was fantastic talking to all of you, and very, very insightful. Thank you so much for making time for this panel discussion. Thank you so much.
Thyrocare, the trust, the truth.
End up watching a lot of web series, Netflix and rest of it. I think that takes your mind off the work, and there is some really good stuff, good quality stuff which is getting produced. So I think that's a good unwinding thing. the only thing which I can be regular at, and I can be more religious about it across the weather. So walking. We'd been to Andamans. I'd never been there before. So I mean, it's top on the mind, and so lovely place to be. So I'll quote that. Would be my laptop with a hoard of movies into it. I carry it with me wherever I go. So the content is more luxury than the cabinet itself. That's how I put it.
SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Engineering, Medical and Health Sciences, Management, Dental, Science and Humanities, Law, Agriculture Sciences, Hotel Management. Admissions open.
When you live in a fast-moving, ever-changing world, life brings forth unlimited possibilities. Yours to explore, excite, enjoy, educate, evaluate, and elucidate with Elan. Never stop moving forward with Darwin Platform Group. Darwin Platform Group, the visionaries.
ThyroCare, the trust, the truth.
Our next panel is talking about technology reinvented at the workplace. The pandemic has accelerated the adoption of digital technologies across industries. How are we going to be adopting artificial intelligence and machine learning as we go forward? What are going to be the game changers? For that, I'd like to invite my colleague Rukmini Rao, Consulting Editor, Business Today, to please introduce the next panel.
Joining me on this panel is a stellar set of people who are leaders in their own right in digital transformation in their own companies. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome Daisy Chittalapalli, MD, Digital Transformation Office, Cisco, Subram Natarajan, who is the Chief Technology Officer at IBM India and South Asia, and Dr. Rohini Srivatsa, who is the National Technology Officer, Microsoft India. The pandemic, of course, has accelerated the adoption of digital technologies and artificial intelligence, machine learning in all spheres of life, and especially across all vertical and industries. I want to get opening thoughts from all of you on which are the areas or the trends that you're seeing, especially with respect to artificial intelligence and machine learning. Daisy, perhaps we can start with you.
And if you talk to any enterprise, even if you talk to the government or you talk to the social sector, the conversation tends to veer towards the power of artificial intelligence in getting more customer intelligence and more better decision making. I think we're starting to see post-pandemic with a great degree of adoption of hybrid work. We're also seeing that shift from the external to the internal, with enterprises using AI to focus on internal use cases as well. Use cases like employee productivity, employee experience, and so on. So that's one clear focus. The power of artificial intelligence to make better sense of data and make better decisions is clearly across industries, perhaps the number one trend. It's an old trend. It's just gained speed post the pandemic. The second trend we're clearly seeing is, at least as Cisco, certainly perhaps because of the vantage point we're seeing, is the integration of cybersecurity and artificial intelligence ops, IT ops, right? So AI, the integration of cybersecurity and AI ops. And again, that one is a no-brainer because you would think that the biggest concern for enterprises particularly enterprises that are becoming more and more digitized, and businesses which are becoming more digitized, and governments which are becoming more digitized, is to use the power, is to harness the power of AI to detect and to mitigate cybersecurity risks. So that's another area. Integration of cybersecurity with AI ops is another space we see increased adoption in. And the third one is, of course, the one where we see the combination of hyper-automation technologies powered by AI.
So what are we seeing at IBM today?
Yeah, I think a lot of what Daisy said is true across the board, right? I think there is a general acceptance that this whole pandemic around 2020 significantly accelerated the digital transformation, and AI played a pivotal role in this transformation. So when we look at general areas where we see AI adoption accelerating, that is AI being an accelerant for the whole digital transformation, I would put it in sort of a 3 or 4 areas similar to what Daisy has mentioned. The first area is customer engagement and experience, of course. Here, the idea would be to use AI either as a conversation engine to provide digital services through contact centers. And there is a heavy use of NLP, NLU technology, which, by the way, has evolved quite a bit in the past few years. By the way, the same technology is also used in help desk functions in many of the companies for their internal facing support functions as well. The second area I could think of is what was highlighted by Daisy already, the intelligent automation space. See, the notion of RPA, robotic process automation, existed even before 2020, but somewhat, sort of a spotty in the organization. With the work from home culture in 2020, companies were forced to think of AI-infused automation in order to bring forth automation in many of the business processes and transform them to offer sort of a more uniform and standardized manner of their services. Third, I would say AI on its own found its way into many of the application areas. So for example, a curated set of products that IBM does is in the AI models and applications to assist a lot of businesses in navigating many aspects of return to work challenge. Lastly, one should not forget the AI impact in the healthcare sector, particularly in the pandemic management, drug discovery, vaccine distribution. For example, IBM, in order to help researchers generate potentially a new drug candidate for COVID-19, we applied, a lot of AI generative frameworks to essentially 3,000 novel molecules. Now we shared these molecules in the Creative Commons, and of course, hoping this helped all the research community in developing the drug design. So, in terms of the industries, also almost all sectors leveraged AI across the board. Actually, it became sort of a necessity to bring AI into the fold. And in many of the corporate functions, we saw banking, retail, government, communication sectors making use of the technology and gaining traction quite widely.
Rohini, what are the trends that you see kind of staying beyond the pandemic and which are going to be systemic in nature?
The Uber point, right, that we all saw during the pandemic, and Satya made a comment that we've seen digitization worth 2 years in 2 months. And clearly digitization drives data, which then drives the use of algorithms to create value from that data. Right, and that is while immediate trend we are seeing in some of the use cases that my colleagues talked about, but has, as you said, much longer term trends in the way organizations are reimagining what their business might look like. So if you saw the pandemic as kind of responding phase, that we were all down to responding to the crisis, then recovering from the crisis, and reimagining phase, right? That reimagining phase is very, very interesting. The fact that India is really noting among the highest, if not the highest in the world, in terms of the level of increase in the use of AI as compared to other major economies, including the US, UK, and Japan, is a very good sign. It's also a question of then continuing on that optimism to really get that leadership value. So as a longer term reimagine phase, right, going beyond the pandemic to say, what is my business going to look like, or what is my government services going to look like as a bigger trend than the early phases of respond and recover. I think the ideas of engaging with your customers through digital channels, through digital assistants, and really taking that customer experience to the next level will be an important one. I think the ability for manufacturing and office locations to become a lot more autonomous and a lot more resilient in terms of being able to have always on facilities, even if there is some kind of a disruption. Those will be important. Similarly, I think our ways of work is probably changed forever. And there will be more and more digital assistants that will come into the workplace, and there will be this augmentation of people and AI in terms of becoming more productive in terms of work.
It's very interesting that you pointed out that India is in the forefront of adoption of AI and ML compared to many other nations. I'm sure us and also our viewers would want to know what kind of research that you see happening out of India in your own respective companies that are, out there for the world to use.
India becomes for many organizations like IBM, Cisco, and Microsoft included, an amazing hotbed. Or I would say almost a laboratory for working on research on problems which are very hard in some ways. Let me explain hard, right? You have to deal with situations where, one, there is huge diversity of languages and huge bandwidth issues, very low cost. You need to have ability to do machine learning, for example, on the edge, which can work under discontinuity of communications, for example. Similarly, there are a lot of social issues so I'll give you a few examples. Microsoft Research has been in India for about 15 plus years. And over the last few years, some very interesting areas that are being worked on from here. One, of course, in the area of language. And from language translation perspective, today, the kind of work that is coming out of India is allowing the support of more than 10 languages from that can be applied by actually 11 Indian languages, which in addition of Oriya most recently, that can enable more than 90% of Indians to access information. Very interesting work is happening on low resource machine learning at the edge from Microsoft Research that will become a key part for embracing intelligence in agriculture and healthcare, in water, in biodiversity. I mean, you name it, right? There's all across the board interesting applications for that. Then similarly, India becomes also a very interesting place for doing AI and machine learning and these type of research on topics which are of societal impact. So some interesting work happening on health and safety monitoring for NGOs who are running school midday meals program that Microsoft is doing along with Accenture. Similarly, work happening on aquatic livelihood with the likes of Jal Jeevika to understand aquaculture and how do you ensure that there is right amount of productivity in those kind of farms. So there's a lot that from a social impact perspective, India offers the opportunity to do work that can be done.
Daisy, Subram, could I get your quick thoughts as well on what is the kind of work that is happening at both your companies?
There are numerous areas where vendors and research institutions are focusing on bringing value to the organizations and the society at large, right? For example, when we are talking about supply chain optimization, we did one of the work with Parley, where the whole idea is to during the pandemic times, how do you predict demand in a complex, multi-party network, and then essentially the idea would be to reduce time to market, right size the inventory across the supply chain throughout, right? And AI played a key role, right? And the first point of adopting this technology and evolution is definitely in the area of customer interaction engagement, right? You might have seen what has happened with ICICI Prudential, where the virtual assistant Lego, interacts with the policyholders much more at ease now. It's just not only the number of languages that we can support, but also the dialects and how the whole NLP has evolved, right? In terms of the core research areas, neurosymbolic question answering, more and more similar to that of how a human being would behave. And that is a core area of artificial intelligence research.
Daisy?
So our approach has been two-pronged. One is, of course, to build artificial intelligence, machine language capabilities into the platforms that we build. And we're part of a global supply chain of engineering for Cisco. So clearly to build and integrate more and more AI capabilities into the platforms that we put out there, into the market, and we use internally as well. So, for example, during the pandemic, India became the second largest user of WebEx for Cisco worldwide, thanks to the hybrid work from home explosion that happened in India. And it was also the time when we brought a lot of AI capabilities into that platform. Like Rohini mentioned, AI that helps to translate and transcribe, right? AI that recognizes gestures and body language, that allows a virtual meeting participant or participants to interact with each other in a more inclusive, more natural kind of a setting. And of course, assistants which can capture key content, can action items from the meeting, and so on and so forth. And internally, again, I think it was Shubhram who mentioned, we had a platform called DNA Spaces, which uses artificial intelligence a lot to decide, what's the floor capacity, where are people on the floor, where are they moving, are they going towards risky spaces or not. So we had platforms externally for customers and, outside to use, as well as we were leveraging the same platforms to deal with some of the challenges that we were facing as an enterprise as well.
Right.
But the second part is, we also recognize that this is a space in which not one company can do everything all on their own, right? So we've been leveraging a lot of the Indian ecosystem, particularly the startup ecosystem, to put out solutions into the social sector primarily, and also into businesses. And during the pandemic, we built with one of our accelerator partners in the country, our own accelerator called Launch. One of the early graduates of that accelerator, a virtual ICU card that got deployed into the public sector, 3 or 4 of the nodal government hospitals in Bangalore, as an example, and also into some very large hospital chains in the country.
For AI and ML to be more efficient, the more data you feed to this, the results are going to be better. And there's no dearth of data when it comes to India, the kind of data India is generating today. I want to get a quick sense from each of you on, which are the areas that can be game changer for India, given the kind of data that we are generating today.
The key is really approaching this in a more pragmatic way of how we take the data, go through the necessary transformation, the life cycle, in not only collecting the data, but organizing it, analyzing it, and then bringing the AI part of it. Because, if you have bad data, you will end up with bad AI. So therefore, that whole life cycle, what we call as AI ladder, is absolutely critical. It's more of a pragmatic way of how you adopt it. But in general, if you look at the India market, I would venture out and say we have no choice but to bring in AI as sort of a front and center of every discussion. What we went through in 2020 has given a taste of digital consumption of products and services for the society at large, the public and population. Now, how we differentiate one from the other, how companies differentiate one from the other, is precisely going to be through technologies like AI. And therefore, AI will become sort of inevitable, right? Whether it is banks, whether it is retail companies, bringing the personalized shopping experience, all kinds of stuff is AI is going to be, used in.
Rohini?
India being data rich, is good, but I think the ability to really leverage and bring value from that data is just super critical. By itself, data doesn't do much. You have algorithms and compute to work on it, and then be part of business processes or whatever to really create value. So I think to your point, there was a recent work again, and NASSCOM had brought out about the Indian economy 2025 5 trillion vision, and out of that about $1 trillion is expected to be digital economy, and out of that about 450 to 500 billion is supposed to be coming out from data and AI. And the main sectors they are called out are the ones which are clearly top of mind for the Prime Minister and have important economic value also. Agriculture being one, energy being another one. Because in each one of them, whether it's energy, right, there's a huge amount of benefit to be obtained from just demand prediction, management, and rationalization of asset utilization. If you go down the area of logistics and mobility, just huge things to be done in terms of network logistics optimization using geospatial data, traffic pattern analysis. If you go down healthcare, clearly we've seen the optimization of health resource allocation and outbreak prediction. If you go down small and medium businesses, there's so much to be done in terms of just throughput optimization, their productivity and cost competitiveness, creating marketplaces. So across the sectors, there is the major sectors of the economy. There's tremendous potential, but again, it needs to put that data into to get value from that data.
Where do you see India in terms of adoption of industrial robotics, and what are the current challenges? If I can get very quick comments from each of you.
So I think the penetration of industrial robots is fairly poor if you take global statistics. Like if we have, I think, about 3 robots for every 10,000. I think that's the number 10,000 workers, right? That is the kind of penetration for India at this point. The US, on the other hand, which is not the best in class, I think Germany and China are the best in class, but the number I saw for the US is almost 189 industrial robots. So clearly the gap between us and the countries which are high on productivity, and as a country, we need to be high on productivity, right? So that is obviously, there is now whether 189 is a good number or something less than that is a good number for India remains to be seen, but we are certainly under-penetrated. I think that much is clear. I think it is a matter of manufacturing, for example, is catching up, right? I think auto manufacturing, for example, the auto plants in India are as automated as anywhere else in the world. And if the pandemic has done anything, it is again speeding up the adoption of robotics, because one of the things that manufacturing companies have come to as a realization is we can no longer have a situation where plants are closed for 2 months if we want to be a serious manufacturing destination in the world. Consideration for a country like India is always how do you shift your semi-skilled workers or poorly skilled workers? What will you shift them to, right? So this conversation about increased industrialization, robotic adoption has to go hand in hand with where will you relieve these workers into? So what jobs do you create for them?
So Brown, do you see investments happening in this front where manufacturing companies are willing to do that kind of investment to have robotics to make that a part of their process?
Absolutely. I think there's clearly catching up to do. Right? I mean, as Daisy pointed out, statistically, I think there's a lot of stuff that we do, and probably because of the cost arbitrage structure, we never made that significant advancement in this area. But what we are seeing is that in the whole pandemic has kind of reminded us that we need to start really introducing robotics at scale, not only just bring the skills to a much more standardized and more uniform delivery of the products and services, but more to do with how do you redeploy the existing skill, the human skills to higher order or higher value jobs, right? So that thought has definitely come in. The second area, I think, where the industries have focused on, particularly the manufacturing and process industry, is to sort of introduce many of these functions associated with AI into their process also. Not necessarily just repetitively doing what a robot would do, but for example, a visual inspection, where typically a human being is involved in really inspecting and validating the quality of the product and so on, you see increasing amount of AI being used in conjunction with robots to deliver what is needed. So similarly, you see the introduction of robots and AI complementing each other, and the investments that is going into those areas definitely are on the increase. They have a lot of catching up to do.
India will have to take a unique approach to automation, in my view. And what I mean by that is that we will have to find a way in which our workforce has the ability to use AI in an augmented fashion. We will. I don't think we will be able to take sort of the best way of automating some things, because of the labor cost structure is completely different. And so our real success would lie in, can we take a process and bring into India? And there's some really interesting ideas out there. If you look at education, healthcare, judiciary, you name it, some of the large sectors, right? And maybe manufacturing is within manufacturing also. How do we ensure that the machine learning and automation is augmenting human skills? Of course, there'll be certain areas where there are safety concerns, or there is the danger of a human being getting fatigued, and you want to make sure quality. So those are definitely cases where you would want to have a machine. But I think there are many cases where you will want to have some kind of an augmentation. What that then goes back to the point that Daisy was making is, I think the skilling in India is also unique. Because it is not just skilling of technical stuff. It is not just skilling of people who build AI systems. There's also skilling of people who use AI systems. There are also people who are on the factory floor but understand how to use a digital system that will be augmenting their skill set. So I think it's a question of understanding the digital skill set beyond the technical and engineering lens that we often use. And that would create, so if you go down, let's say education space, if you are able to have teachers in the remote areas who are able to use augmentation of AI-based either content platforms or ability to understand how students are doing in the class, but are able to use that as augmentation in terms of their own interaction with students and understanding the students' learning methodology and empathy, etc. Then you've created an ability to really use the workforce and enable them with AI. And I think that is the unique method that India needs to use, and the skilling has to then follow what that unique method needs to be.
What would be the future of workplaces post adoption of AI ML? What are the changes that we are going to see, how businesses are going to be functioning and how offices are going to be? From futuristic lens, probably in the next 2-3 years, the big changes that one should expect.
What we will see is the adoption of many of these technologies, including AI, at scale. And that would require a fair bit of transparency of the technology that we use, the trust and transparency. And that will be an area where a lot of companies will grow, and you will see people wanting to adopt this, establishing the trust, and the technology itself is evolving through trusted and open frameworks, becoming much more evolutionary. And it will become so ubiquitous, so we don't even realize that they are part of how we conduct ourselves, both at home as well as at office. This is the reality. This is what is unfolding in front of us.
We have to relook at the way that work itself is done, right? And to the point about AI and ML, and to the point about augmentation that Rohini made, one of the most successful use cases or very popular use cases during the pandemic has been this artificial intelligence powered robo called Flowbot One in Europe, which has been aiding and assisting medical staff to collect and analyze samples, and actually helps with almost 1,000 COVID cases a day. So, it's a great example of augmentation, right? The human-machine interface that we keep talking about, and that balance. So certainly work will change, workspace will change, but work will also change. And I think workers will also change dramatically, right? I think the biggest thing perhaps it's a good note to end on, is we must all keep an open mind to the way in which we will all have to make shifts, whether that's the way we go to work, or not go to work physically, the way we think about work and who we share that work with and how we are, the kind of work we would do ourselves.
Thank you to all of you for having joined us on this panel. And with that, we conclude the session. And thank you all of you.
Thyrocare, the trust, the truth.
SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Engineering, Medical and Health Sciences, Management, Dental, Science and Humanities, Law, Agriculture Sciences, Hotel Management. Admissions open.
When you live in a fast-moving, ever-changing world, life brings forth unlimited possibilities. Yours to explore, excite, enjoy, educate, evaluate, and elucidate with elan. Never stop moving forward with Darwin Platform Group. Darwin Platform Group, the visionaries.
Thyrocare, the trust, the truth.
Moving on to our keynote address on stock markets, the dichotomy. At a time when most economic indicators are falling, the one positive factor is the sustained rise of the stock markets, not just in India but globally too. So what is driving the bulls when all the other indicators are bearish? We have with us Mr. Nirmal Jain, founder and chairman IIFL Group, explaining the dichotomy. Economy is down but the stock markets are up. Listen in.
Hello friends, welcome to Business Today's Mind Rush Conclave. And the theme of the conference or this session is very interesting. The dichotomy, economy is down and stock market is up. And this is not the first time this has happened. The stock market always behaves seemingly independently in the short term. And in the long term, it follows the economic growth and corporate earnings. So at this point in time, we are passing through something which is unprecedented. When the pandemic happened about 9-10 months ago, everybody thought that stock markets will crash. And in fact, if you track stock indices, which is Nifty, then last year, I think Nifty might have given a return of something like 15%. But if you have to invest on 1st of April, you would have got a return of almost 62%. That shows that how markets reacted in the first few days after the lockdown and how well they recovered. And going in this year, they're still doing better and better. We'll come to a few drivers and what I think, but in this market, nobody has a crystal ball and nobody knows how market is going to behave next day or even in next hour. In terms of fundamental factors, India has done significantly better than most other countries, not in the economy. I'm talking about even in containing the pandemic, the number of new infections that we are seeing, they continue to edge down. And there are many countries that are actually experiencing a resurge and a second wave. So government has also announced a number of reforms and stimulus, but they are fairly modest as compared to many other countries. They're just about 2% of GDP. So the positive news flow on vaccination along with Biden's victory in the US election has also driven risk on sentiment globally. So when there's the liquidity is benign there, they look at making risky bets, and India is one of the favorites there. This has benefited India because India has received a disproportionately large amount of foreign portfolio flow in the calendar year 2020, and it looks like that flow is continuing this year as well. Most other emerging markets except China have reported actually outflows. So if there is a given amount of money to be invested in emerging markets, people want to have alternative to China as well. India stands out as a key beneficiary and a large economy that can absorb investment. So while the lockdown actually hit the economy hard, and we saw that GDP contracted by 24% in the first quarter of this financial year, the growth momentum recovered very sharply in the second quarter itself. And the GDP contraction was only 7.5% in the second quarter. And actually most of the economists and analysts track high frequency data points, and they could see that there's a YY growth in many sectors. Also, the employees with higher skills and higher income jobs had the flexibility of working from home. And even workers with lower skill or low income who lost their jobs due to social distancing, they also started seeing that there was many of the jobs were coming back. And what we have seen that at least, when we talk about HNIs or households with in the upper income group, they basically had higher savings and their income flow was continuing. Corporate earnings also rebounded very strongly in second quarter itself. And we are seeing that the momentum is continuing in the third quarter of this financial year. So when I say second quarter financial year, is September ended quarter. And this was actually helped by aggressive cost cutting and also lower interest costs. So the government made liquidity very easy, and that has driven the interest cost down. When we track EBITDA of, say, BSE 500 companies, it jumped by 7% YOY in the second quarter versus 27% drop in the previous quarter, which is the first quarter of this financial year. And similarly, if you look at aggregate profit after tax, that also grew by 13% year on year in the second quarter as compared to 30% decline in the first quarter. These are the parameters which are very important for stock market. I'm just trying to explain how a stock market is doing so well, whereas the news on the macroeconomic front is not as positive. Now, better than expected results are driving broad-based earnings upgrades. And when we see the consensus estimates, they imply that aggregate profit after tax for BSE 500 companies expected to grow by 9% and quarter on quarter and 33% YOY. Sorry, 9% YOY in FY21 and 33% in FY22. And market will always look at 1 year or 2 year forward earnings. And now GDP is expected to contract by a total of 8% in this year, but will grow on a lower base by 10% YOY next year. So when you look at earnings growth, which are key driver for stock market, probably you'll see a very, very strong growth next year. Also, we see that the financial sector has reported increase in NPAs, non-performing assets, which is not a good news. But most people expected much worse. And when we saw a commentary of large lenders, banks and NBFCs, it turned out as a positive surprise that things are not as bad. So in stock market, what happens when you expect much worse and things are a little better than that, market always reacts positively because the much worse news was discounted. And now from there on, you have a positive delta, which is going up. What we have seen is that the equity issuances have seen a significant surge because, as I explained, that the flow of capital from the foreign investors has been very strong and continues this year as well. Some of the divergence in corporate earnings and the broader economic growth or broader economic parameters that we track is also explained by the market share gain by the larger players. And they basically dominate the indices in the stock market. So when you look at the stock market indices, they will have a huge weightage of companies like, say, Reliance, Infosys, Tata, Tisco, and the large ones. And they might be gaining market share at the cost of smaller players. So this is again one feature which plays out in the stock market performance. Now, another important thing is that India's external account is in a very comfortable situation now. Our current account surplus is 3.1%. So in terms of foreign currency, we are very stable and this is because there's a strong capital flow is also helping foreign exchange reserves to be at record high. And therefore, dollar is depreciating globally, while RBI has kept rupee in a tight band, but at least rupee has not depreciated. And that basically is very encouraging for foreign investors to put in more capital in equity markets. Because for them, if the currency depreciates, then they'll take fewer dollars by selling the same stock. And if on the other hand, the currency appreciates, that's very good for their investment. So when we look at stock market, I think there are a few things which are very important. The stock market looks forward. Whatever has happened till till today is of very little relevance, because that is all reflected in the price, or that is all known. So say when you're buying a stock today, it might have had negative growth this year of 20%, but if you know with reasonable certainty that next year it will have a 30% positive growth, you'll be very excited by that opportunity. So one, market is looking forward, and therefore market is looking at the possibility of economy rebounding very strongly. And there are enough signs and indicators that can happen, and that probably will happen in India very well. Two, market hates uncertainty and not bad news as much. Because what happens when there has been, people don't know, and that is what happened in the first 10 days or 15 days or first 1 month of pandemic, when people did not know how bad the disease can be, whether this will be contained, then there was a panic. But when people realize that the mortality is not as high, and of course, maybe in finite time we'll find a solution, then market recovers. Third, very important thing, we should know that the stock market multiples are always function of interest rate. So theoretically, it starts with a reciprocal of interest rate. So supposing interest rate is 10%, then you require 100 rupees to make 10 rupees. But if interest rate goes down to 5%, then you require 200 rupees to make 10 rupees, right? You require double the money. So you'll be willing to pay twice in terms of debt investment to get the same income. So, at least in concept, the equity valuations also go up by equal proportion. Of course, they have to be adjusted for growth and risk. But broadly speaking, if the lower the interest rate, higher will be the PE multiples and the stock market valuations, as well as flow of money to equity markets, because your opportunity cost of fund has gone down. So all these factors have driven the markets, which we can understand. Going forward, also India's economy looks good, and India is a market which will do well over medium to long term. And I'm always an optimist, so I always think that stock markets, of course, nobody can predict market in the short term, but if you're a long-term investor and the Indian economy does well, then you'll do well in Indian stock markets as well. I mean, provided, of course, you invest in right type of stocks and hold it for long enough time period.
Thyrocare, the trust, the truth.
Been reading and hanging with my kids when they spare time to hang with me. And well, I have pets. So unfortunately, I lost my dog in the pandemic. So I have, after a few months, got another one. So I hang with him. He's a baby beagle. So that's basically my unwinding. And now, of course, I've started watching television, but I do a lot of reading, fundamentally. I have this this regular breathing regimen, which is deep breathing and some elements of yoga, some elements of other stuff which is recommended. And then I do very light exercise, push-ups, and sometimes go on the treadmill. But that's not more than 20-25 minutes a day. I like beach resorts, I like mountain resorts. I have them myself, so I go there. I like jungle resorts. If you ask me a country, then I really like Spain and I like Rome. And I could vacation anywhere there. Though I'm being urged by friends now to try France. I mean, post-pandemic. I've not really bought anything which would be like watches or I don't know, a sports car and stuff like that. But I think my most indulgent purchase has been actually once I went and bought a few hundred books over a full day. And that was in the US, in Barnes & Noble. And I had it all shipped to India. Because these were books I could not get and I think they were not available on Amazon or something like that. So that may have been an indulgent purchase. It was a couple of 100 kilos, by the way, of books.
SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Engineering, Medical and Health Sciences, Management, Dental, Science and Humanities, Law, Agriculture Sciences, Hotel Management. Admissions open.
When you live in a fast-moving, ever-changing world, life brings forth unlimited possibilities. Yours to explore, excite, enjoy, educate, evaluate, and elucidate with elan. Never stop moving forward with Darwin Platform Group. Darwin Platform Group, the visionaries.
Thyrocare, the trust, the truth.
Our next panel discussion is on rebuilding businesses. The lockdown hit some businesses very badly. Some actually gained and some others saw demand rising soon after the lockdown happened, but saw it taper off later. To see how different industries fared, we have CEOs from different businesses and how they rebuilt it all. We have with us Mr. Suresh Narayanan, Chairman and Managing Director of Nestle, who saw businesses rise soon after the lockdown happened. Mr. Ravinder Thakkar, Managing Director and CEO of Vodafone Idea, that saw rising demand for services, and Mr. Patu Keswani, CMD of Lemon Tree Hotels, who had many hotels shut for an extended period. Moderating this discussion is Rajeev Dubey, Editor Business Today and Managing Editor Business TV Today Network.
Welcome to this last panel in the 2021 edition of Business Today Mind Rush, rebuilding businesses from the pandemic. The pandemic was truly unprecedented in its scale, in its impact, in the kind of fear psychosis it spread across the world. And so it left almost every organization scrambling for answers to the crisis that we were faced with. And so we have with us three businesses who have dealt with this crisis, are rebuilding their businesses from the pandemic. We have Patu Keswani, who is the Chairman and Managing Director of Lemon Tree Hotels, which represents the travel and tourism industry, badly ravaged by the pandemic, but still not fully recovered. We have two other businesses which had twin problems to grapple with. One was, of course, that every other company was facing, which was the crisis, which was the lockdown. But on the other hand, they had other responsibilities. Suresh Narayanan represents Nestle India, Chairman and Managing Director, representing the FMCG industry, which had to deal with increased demand in the market and were truly COVID warriors in that sense. And Ravinder Thakkar, Managing Director and CEO of Vodafone Idea, represents the telecom industry, which also had to, besides all the problems, had to deal with overloaded networks because almost everybody was working from home. Welcome to all of you, gentlemen. But before we get into rebuilding businesses, I would want to request you to give us a sense of those first few days of the lockdown. And maybe even before, when the lockdown was announced, what was going through your mind? What was the first impressions that you had? What kind of chaos and confusion prevailed in your mind and in your organizations? Mr. Keswani, let me start with you, because your industry was immediately hit and very, very badly hit.
We actually, well, I can say very honestly, I didn't anticipate in February it would be quite so terrible last year. But by early March, it became clear that it would spread. So then I think we did a lot of work internally on what steps we would take for different levels of revenue destruction. So basically we have a BCP plan for events like this. So basically we said what level of destruction of revenue will occur and what will be our response to it. In our case, 70% of our hotels are owned by us. So we have obviously a large amount of debt. Plus, the previous year, we had operationalized about $200 million worth of investments, 250, of which about 150 million was incremental debt. And our business is highly fixed costs because the main costs are, fixed power costs, people costs, and fees. So what we asked ourselves is three questions. One is, what are the boundary conditions within which we'll operate? So the first was that we will not lay off anybody. We have about 8,200 employees, and we said we will not lay them off, but we will find creative ways to reduce the payroll expense. The second boundary condition was, we felt that if this pandemic hit, then the guys who would die would be the MSME vendors that we have. So the second was not only having a cash cushion to meet our own debt obligations or regulatory or payroll, but also to always pay our small vendors who have a turnover of, say, less than, I think we had a number 50 crores or something, pay them all within 30 days, because otherwise they would die for sure. So with these two boundary conditions, we identified actually 3 levels of revenue destruction: 40% versus the last year, 60% and 80%. So we will not ask anybody to go. We will reduce salaries rather than ask individuals. So suppose we want to target a 40% salary reduction, then everybody takes, based on their salaries in the top 800 people, they take salary cuts from 50 going to me to 100, right? So that dropped actually our salary costs enormously. And in other cases, of course, we did what we routinely do. What I found was, and I'm sure every company has found this, is that there is enormous flab that builds into the system over time, especially if you're starting to, you're doing well. So we identified as much as we could. And I joked today with even my board that, there are 3 types of costs. One are those you defer. So like we renovate hotels every year. So we push that out 1 year. Then there are costs that you cut, which are flab, which are good costs, cut. And then there are costs that you cut, which are muscle, which is bad cost cutting. But you end up doing it. I was not expecting the lockdown, obviously. But at some level, we were expecting this demand destruction. The lockdown was just confirming that the demand destruction would move towards the worst case scenario. So my reaction was very negative, obviously.
Okay. Mr. Narayan, the first few days, first few hours of the confusion?
Well, I remember, the kind of smoke before the fire was apparent sometime in February itself. And the telltale signs for me was when Nestle globally announced that international travel had been suspended. So that was in February itself. The company had announced globally that we will not have any more travel taking place internationally. I think for me, the pivoting point was really the 16th of March when we met we have a COVID crisis committee as a company, which is steered by me, and also which is got manifestations in the different factories and in the different branch offices that we've got. We took a call on that day, and it was still just a little bit of smoke was billowing. But I think collectively we took the call, and finally, of course, as the head of the company, I take the call on this. I said from the next day, 17th of March, I said we will all start to work from home. It was easier said because that's kind of an instruction. But really, it is a tribute to my team, consisting of the people in HR, in administration, in IT, in general services, that in a matter of 48 hours, we had almost 1,000 people. And if you include those in our regional offices, another 1,500 to 2,000 people who had been put on remote working with access and with capabilities to work from home. I honestly thought, Rajiv, that this would be a few days. I mean, I honestly never thought that it would last as long as it has lasted. We also took action across in the factories because there was huge chaos that followed after the first lockdown. And I think what we really focused on, Rajiv, and this is still the top priority for me, is people. I firmly believe that this is the time when you don't run a company, you serve a family. And as a leader and as a management team, we said, look, this is the time for us to serve the constituents who make Nestle.
Mr. Thakkar?
First thing that obviously that comes to mind is how are we going to keep our services running? Because people are going to be home. They're not going to be traveling outside. this is their only way of connectivity. And certainly people will not only want to make sure that that works and it's always available, but at the same time, potentially the usage will also go up, and we need to make sure that it's working. So I think the biggest issue was how are we going to do that, and with that in mind, the intent was, well, a lot of people will have to be out in the field. How do we make sure that we get the permits for those guys? We are essential service, engaging with the relevant authorities, not only, of course, locally in each of the districts that we were in, but then also the state authorities as well as the national authorities as well. So how to make sure that we'll be working through that. And I think we had significant challenges there initially, which all got eventually ironed out and obviously we improved. But I think the first week that was quite a bit of challenge in that, and I think that was one of the biggest things that we were facing is how do we make sure that the network stays up. The second part was, of course, from a customer perspective, two things that were important, which is besides making the network run, which is if you run out of your validity and you need to recharge, you need to top up. How do they do that when the shops are closed? So making sure that our digital gateways are working, people can do that online. And in cases in which people didn't have online capabilities, how do we make sure our distributors are able to provide them with credit in a way without having to leave their homes and so on. So I think we worked out some processes which were quite good. So not only make sure our network is up and running, but at the same time, actually people as they need to recharge and so on, those capabilities existed. And I think it was quite, it was clearly chaotic, but at the same time, it was actually quite impressive at the speed at which people worked. And then, of course, the last thing was really, we were worried about the health and safety and well-being of our employees. We want to make sure that they are safe, not only in the homes that they're going to be there, but at the same time, how do they get to do work? How do they actually stay connected to the business as well? I think it was challenging, certainly, but it was at the same time. I think the focus of people, and as I said earlier, that this is we basically just said we have to find solution to these problems, and no is not an answer. And I think in many cases that how it ended up being. And so that's how I would describe the first week or so.
So Keswani, as things cleared out, as lockdown opened, how did you go about rebuilding your business? What was it like at that point in time, and what has been the journey so far?
So unlike most companies in the hotel space, we didn't really shut most of our hotels down. So in Q1, which is, I think, in our case, April to June, if I remember right, about 79 or 80% of our rooms were operational. And interestingly, we had about 2,500 employees staying in the hotels. Because like Suresh was saying, we also, had the same thing that people were coming from outside and coming and working. And we have a very young team, so our average age is maybe 27 or 28. So what we did was that a bunch of people said they want to go on leave, and they had earned leave, so they left. We shut our office also on the 17th of March. So we have about 250 people in our corporate office. They have not come back. And I don't want to open the corporate office till the vaccine is administered. So these people went home. A bunch of employees went home. Whoever were left, they moved them into our hotels. And they were staying in the hotels. And what we did is we kept the hotels, the low demand hotels, let me put it this way, in some form of coma, which means we only kept, in a 100-room hotel, we kept 20 rooms open and just ran it at the lowest possible cost. And now we have 100% of our inventory open. And this was a very gradual process. And the critical thing, I totally agree with Suresh, is this at this time, it is when your employees, your suppliers, your guests, who are themselves so worried and uncertain, that this is when they need support. So we were very clear, we will give that support. And today we have 100% of our inventory running, and about 2,000 employees staying in the hotel. So they're learning also how it is to be a guest. And things are hunky-dory actually for us now.
And recovery in terms of revenue and...
So revenue in our case, we didn't do so badly. Out of those 12,000 rooms that were sold in in April, I remember we did about 1,500. We did about, see, our fair market share in the branded space is about 5%, and in the mid-market space is 17%. But we did, on an all India basis, we did 12.5% in April. And it has only grown since then.
Yeah, I think, for us really, as I mentioned to you, it was more a question of getting ourselves operationally with our feet on the ground. I think that was the most important part. And really, for me, there are three parts to it. One is our purpose as a company. The company's global purpose, which has stood in good stead for more than 150 years, is food quality and safety. I mean, that's what really we stand for. So during this pandemic, I think one of the things that it went back almost like an instinct to us is to ensure that all the disciplines that we needed across our work sites, be it sanitation, social distancing, masking, thermal checking, etc., we implemented it all from day one, and far more stringently than what any normal player would have done, because we said that is extremely important. We played within that, and we extended this facility also to our suppliers. We have almost 8,000 suppliers, and out of them, about 10-15% of them are whatever you would call the MSMEs, the micro and small and medium enterprises. We really provided them a huge amount of support, both in terms of training and in terms of equipping and in terms of orders, advance payments. Exactly the same philosophy that Patu had said before. I said we have to be like a banyan tree. We have to protect everyone who stands underneath it. So I think that was the second piece that we did around partnerships. The same applied to our distributors, same applied to our redistributors, same applied to our frontline distributor salesmen.
Mr. Thakkar?
As I mentioned earlier, I mean, there was a bit of a shock earlier on. I think all of us went into this. How will we do this part? And it is a bit of a sense of overwhelming. How will we deal with the situation? But I think in some ways there were 2-3 things that really were very critical. One, which is we knew that our customers, which are already relying on connectivity, as a very, very important part, are going to be even more reliant on this service. So I think the first and foremost thing on our mind was we needed to make sure that our services remain up and running, independent of the nature of the lockdown or independent of pandemic. So we wanted to make sure that our field forces, that are people who are maintaining our network, are constantly making sure that every cell site is working, is up and running. There's no disruption in the business. How do we do that? And I think our field services team really stepped up. We had discussions with each one of them. We wanted to make sure that we get them the PPE equipment as quickly as possible. We purchased a significant amount of PPE equipment, made sure that all of that was made available to them quickly. They were encouraged to not only, of course, be safe, but at the same time, make sure that they follow the rules for their local and districts that they're in, and they are out there actually supporting people. And not surprisingly, and in many positive ways, the response from the local authorities, the regional authorities, and the national authorities are very, very positive in supporting our employees in making sure that they continue to provide the services. So just like healthcare workers, they were given the right permits, they were given ability to move around, they were asked many times to go into societies where sites were down to make them up and running and add diesel and so on and so forth. So those type of things that was done very, very, very well. The other part is that we wanted to digitalize and enable our partners, which is means our distributors, our retailers, our various points of sale, which were across the country, and we have over 1 million of them across the country. And they're also, again, not only with our field services team in terms of educating them, but also digitalization of the processes really actually came in very, very handy, and we were able to do them quickly. And then last but not least was our employees. Not only the ones which were working on the field, but at the same time, the ones who were working from home, making sure that they were enabled, they were connected. We, of course, were talking to all of them and making sure that they know what to do in this period of time.
What's been your experience of productivity during this period, Mr. Keswani? What is it like productivity in work from home?
Well, most of our employees don't work from home. So the corporate office, I actually totally agree with Suresh. We were, in fact, our team and we were all having a conversation how people seem to be able to, deliver the same amount of output as we want, sitting out of home. The only thing that I find missing where people want to come back to office is because of the social need. Our staff to room ratio was 1. We had 8,000 rooms, 8,000 staff, broadly. I'm told now that we can operate the company at 0.7. It's not insignificant. That means we're talking 30% of 8,000 people are actually excess in our system. We've had some attrition, so there are still, and we are opening a bunch of hotels in the next 2 years, about 20 hotels. So we don't need to hire new staff. It's amazing. And that productivity improvement is so much a part of them because people are multi-skilling. You see, you don't have 4 people and say as bellboys, as an example.
Yeah.
And there are only 2, and there are 3 guests. So some guy from security or some guy from the front office or from food and beverage goes and picks up a bag and does it too. And that culture building of multitasking I think, is going to play an enormous role for us going forward.
Yeah, Narayan.
Yeah, I think I tend to echo what Patu said about efficiency and productivity. I was honestly very, very surprised. I mean, I never expected. People settled into work from home extremely quickly. I know that there have been pain points in terms of infrastructure. People with families. You have your parents, you have your grandparents, you have extended families staying with you. It has not been easy. It has not been easy, and I must say that for the women employees of the company, it has especially been more difficult times because they have got multiple responsibilities in addition to managing the role within the company. But having said that, I'm happy to say that the morale of the company continues to be high. The level of engagement has been very high. The level of empowerment, some of it has been forced because there are some leaders who don't like to empower, who've been forced to empower because they had no other way of getting the job done. So that has happened. Empowerment has been great. Ideation and the quality of ideas that have been coming out is outstanding. Some of the work that we have done on digital, Rajeev, is really outstanding work. Maybe we would have taken a couple of years to get there, but we have now been forced into the digital revolution much faster than the normal cycle. So these have all been positives across the value chain of the company.
Mr. Tucker, what was your experience of productivity during this phase, during the lockdown, and what are the learnings from the productivity front?
Actually, just as Suresh was mentioning earlier, there were many surprises in the sense that we in our businesses normally we've all been debating about how fast we want to accelerate on digitalization, how to be enabled work from home for years, and it was always sort of you can only do this, you can only do this, you can only go so far, and there were a lot of naysayers. And what we saw was that just because we were put in this situation, actually when we were put up against it and we were forced to act, actually things moved. Guess what? Businesses adapted. In many cases, things that we never thought could be done, people were able to do it. Just to give you an example, we went into national lockdown at a fairly short notice. Our business, like many businesses, became an essential service. And suddenly, we had to run a nationwide network, which had to be up 99.9% of the time. And many of the things that we do just require physically people to be present on feet on the street, whether it's, recharges, whether it's actually going out and filling diesel, whether it is, as sites go down, doing field services and so on. We automated so many of these things just overnight. And somehow we were able to manage service levels which were as good, if not better. We added, our capacity requirements went up by 30% just in the first week of the lockdown. And suddenly we saw that our capacity expanded and we were able to add that capacity digitally and through software upgrades and all done remotely.
So before we close, I wanted to understand from each one of you, what are the major challenges you foresee from here on in dealing with this and also in the way our economy is in the business arena, because we still haven't, we're still shrinking as an economy. At least we'll continue to shrink this fiscal. And beyond this, so what are the big challenges that you're readying yourself and your organizations with to cope with?
I really see, Rajiv, four big challenges that the post-pandemic era will throw upon us. Number one is managing the uncertainty of the post-pandemic world. Number two is companies and organizations will have to learn to manage operations while changing the wheels of the car in motion. You're not going to have the advantage of stopping the car and addressing a flat tire. You have to keep running the car, change the flat tire, and ensure that you're going in the right direction. So the challenge in terms of operating capabilities is going to become manifold as a consequence of this. Number three is managing people. I think people have made up their minds. They know that a crisis throws up the best and worst in people. They know what kind of organizations they're in, what kind of leadership they're faced, what is the look and smell of the place when things are difficult. So managing people will be a very key metrics. And finally, as businesses, managing expectations. Expectations of your employees, expectations of your stakeholders, expectations of your shareholders. The fact of the matter is that all these steady state principles that we will continue to click at a particular growth rate irrespective of what happens around you is now thrown to the winds.
I would agree with Suresh. I think those are critical elements. Maybe one or two more things to add. I think one thing that in my mind will become challenging and will continue to is that the consumer behavior is changing it was changing already, but it's changing at a much faster pace now. And while I think we have done an incredible job in the last year in adapting to changes in consumer behaviors, at the speed at which it is going to change going forward, I think we have to adapt our companies and we have to adapt our businesses at a pace which is going to be very different. And I think that in a sustained manner, not in an emergency or not in a crisis manner, but I think because the speed is now so fast, we have to maintain that speed. And I think that creates a challenge that we have not seen. The second part to me is, again, adding on to it, is around employees. The skill sets that are required and going to be required going forward are going to be very different. Not only from how do you manage people, how do you work from home, how do you actually do some of the things that you used to do, and how we measure people is going to be different. But the skill set that the employees need to actually perform in this new world that's going to be forward, I think that's going to be quite different as well.
Mr. Keswani?
Well, I think there are four things personally, as in our business, I'd be worried about or focusing on. One is, of course, digitalization. So we find it has helped us a lot in both customer outreach and efficiency. I think we are going to focus heavily. So earlier, what we may have perhaps done over a 4-year window, we will try and do this year itself. That's the first point. Second is, I think one of the biggest changes is going to be demand from different segments for us. Interestingly, we find in our retail segment, where we have in our loyalty program 1.5 million guests, actually, regular members, that's jumped up first. So I think if I want to look at de-risking myself, and I'm linking it to my earlier comment, then one is I want to focus on these emerging new segments and their needs, rather than the old traditional segments like corporates and so on and so forth. So that's linked to our digital strategy, outreach, and so on. My view is that 4 years from now, and we do this 4-year plan annually actually, the kind of customers we will have will be completely different to the customers we had pre-COVID. That's a 5-year window. So we need to identify these new customers and their needs. Third is asset light. I think the other thing I don't want is the level of assets on our balance sheet. I don't want anymore. So we'll have to find a creative way to divest them. And I think the last is, when I look on a 10-15-year window out, I feel that work from home, digital, better communication and so on and so forth means that there will be less business travel as an entity put together. And therefore, And I think people will be more and more leisure focused, which is ironic because the last 50 years in the hotel business, leisure hotels were always far less profitable and far more seasonal than business hotels. So the next question is, how do we capture a disproportionate share of supply of leisure assets in India and around India, because that's where we operate. So I mean, it's no rocket science. These are evident to us. So we'll work on that.
Well, Mr. Narayanan, Mr. Thakkar, and Mr. Keswani, I think phenomenal insights, lot to munch over, and amazing understanding from your learnings from your discussion. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being part of Business Today Mind Rush.
Thyrocare, the trust, the truth.
We have a special message from Mr. Frederick Vidal, VP and Head of South Asia and Managing Director, India.
Congratulations, Frederick, on recently marking 25 years in India. We would like to start the conversation with, like pandemic has disrupted business models, questioned many pre-existing notions. It has made leaders rethink about centralized supply chains, sustainability, product lines, and how they do business in general. Can you share what are the paradigms that the pandemic has made you question?
I think that's a very interesting question. And when you go through these type of crises, everything is up for change, to be honest. And if you don't have that attitude, I think you will perish. So some of the changes that we have noticed then is the significant reduction in the dependency on office centricity. And before that was also an image thing, right? To be present and have your logos in physical locations, etc. We have closed 11 offices during 2020. And we have realized that those offices are no longer needed. There's a different need for investing same money that went perhaps towards these offices into different aspects of the business, digital of course being one. So I think office centricity, working from home actually works. I never expected that. I would say that in that essence, I'm probably a traditionalist. I didn't like people working from home. I didn't like working from home, pre-pandemic. And now I think it actually is a very, very good combination. Not 100%, I don't think, but 1 or 2 days a week, work from home and be quiet and work on the things that matter, etc., etc. So very interesting. Another thing I think is also traveling. Traveling will be important in the future, but significantly less important. And we have already said that nobody will travel in the future for the purpose of reviewing numbers. Nobody. We will travel to build culture, but not the reviewing numbers. That is easily done on Zoom or Teams or whatever platform you prefer, So there's a bunch of learnings. And perhaps also another part that we have learned, but maybe perhaps which is more of a challenge, is how do you build a culture virtually? That is much more difficult than physically, of course. So that is a challenge, has been a challenge. I think we already in Oriflame have such a strong culture, so that has remained in the past year. But, as we go along, we need to figure out how we drive culture virtually as well.
A lot of businesses during the pandemic came online. They listed themselves on the whole aggregator model. And Oriflame has largely stuck to its original script of direct selling, word of mouth. So how do you see that strategy in the post-pandemic world? Do you think that it is still possible to stick to it? And what will then be the digital strategy moving on?
I think it's an interesting question. And direct selling, as you say, has evolved over the past decade. and it has evolved significantly in the past couple of years, and of course then enormously during the pandemic. And today our industry is better referred to as social selling. And the word of mouth is equally important for any business, regardless of industry. In our businesses, it's super important too. And this word of mouth is the same. It's just digital now. And you can reach out to many more people with whatever you want to talk about. So from that aspect, that really and truly goes in our favor.
So, Frederick, are there any questions or any last thoughts that you would like to share? Any lessons learned, on your personal capacity as a leader, on how you will do things differently next year? One, work from home certainly is one. Apart from that, anything else?
I think it's good. And actually, I was thinking about this the other day, and I actually wrote a LinkedIn feature on this recently. Okay. And from a leadership point of view, I think that 2021 will be similar to 2020, yet different. And I think as a leader, you need to really focus on a couple of attitudes and attributes in your organization going forward. And I think innovation must be in the forefront. And not only innovations when it comes to products, but innovations all around, like you mentioned in the beginning, Soma. Strategies for the future. Then you need to have guts. You need to have guts to implement those things. And things that might be scary to you, you have to just have guts to do things differently. And I think lastly, you need empathy. I hope that the 20s, we're now in the 20s, I hope the 20s is the decade of empathy. And empathy is the understanding of other people's situations, not sympathy. Those two words are different. And I think empathic organizations build and cement culture. So that's what I will drive going forward.
I'm very passionate about trekking, walking in general. When I'm, feeling slightly low, I would want to, kind of go out and take a long walk, sometimes 2 hours also. During the lockdown, for example, I started something called, Mumbai on foot, which I started with my son. So we used to go Saturday mornings, 2.5, 3 hours of walk, and we used to walk on the roads of Mumbai. So I have now seen Mumbai on foot for really well. So walking, trekking, challenging myself, on exercise, etc., yoga is something that, I have really got into in the last 1.5 years. Mantra is, getting those 3-4 hours early in the morning. I like to get up early, irrespective of whatever hour I sleep. I like to get up at around 5:30, 6 o'clock. Those 3-4 hours are very precious for me. I do varied things, starting from cycling to yoga to, I like to mix it up so that it is not boring. The place that I want to go back every time is Leh. Leh Ladakh I have done many times. It's a place that keeps calling you. Once you are there, you have to go there every year. With family, definitely one vacation, in Goa every year. And if we get an opportunity to go out of India, then great. But Goa and Leh is something that I think I like to go back, every year. I'm passionate about cars, something that I indulged in very early. Even when I could not afford it, I thought, let me drive this car. So that's my, prized possession. Otherwise, I'm quite a family person. If I'm with my family for a long time, it is very precious for me. So I really, enjoy those hours.
SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Engineering, Medical and Health Sciences, Management, Dental, Science and Humanities, Law, Agriculture Sciences, Hotel Management. Admissions open.
When you live in a fast-moving, ever-changing world, life brings forth unlimited possibilities. Yours to explore, excite, enjoy, educate, evaluate, and elucidate with elan. Never stop moving forward with Darwin Platform Group. Darwin Platform Group, the visionaries.
Thyrocare, the trust, the truth.
Now we head to the most exciting part of the day, the Business Today India's Best CEO Awards. It's been a tough year for businesses and CEOs, but there are people who stand out. This year we have in all 18 Best CEO Awards. Of these, 12 are sector awards, 4 overall and 1 Champion of Champion, and of course 1 Lifetime Achievement Award. We start off with the sector awards in alphabetical order. The first sector award is for the agriculture and allied sector. The winner this year is Alluri Indra Kumar, CEO and Managing Director of Hyderabad-based Avanti Feeds, which controls close to half of India's shrimp feed business.
Thank you for the award given by Business Today, and I'm really honored and confidence what Business Today has put on our company and us is great. And I look forward to meet you after the COVID, after this virtual. Now we are on the virtual meeting, and when we are able to meet after COVID, definitely I would like to meet you. Thank you.
The next award is for the auto and auto ancillary sector, a sector that has been hit by sliding demand. And a winner this year is Mr. Nikhil Nanda, the CMD of Escort, who scripted an amazing turnaround driven by rising tractor sales.
I want to thank the Business Today Group and the jury members for this award. I'm most humbled to hear of this recognition, which I accept on behalf of the entire Escorts ecosystem. This award is a reflection of all the hard work given by all the men, women, our suppliers, our channel partners, our joint venture partners in serving the customers and serving the society, which has been what we have done for the last 75 years. I want to give you the commitment that this quest and this journey will continue and that we will find all means to add value and establish that unbreakable trust with our customers and society. I want to thank you once again for this honor and for this recognition. It brings in more responsibility for the organization to serve and to grow beyond the expectations of what we have from our own selves. Thank you very much and namaskar.
We now head to an industry where each one of us is deeply connected to. It is banking. The winner this year is a veteran who built India's largest private sector bank from scratch. No prizes for guessing the winner. It is Mr. Aditya Puri, the former Managing Director of HDFC Bank.
I humbly accept this award on behalf of all my colleagues at HDFC Bank. We have had an excellent relationship with Business Today, who have discussed with us professionally as to the changes that are coming about in the banking system and how a bank should position ourselves, and asked us to provide our strategy, and thereafter they go through a very rigorous process. So we thank them for this award as well, and we thank them for recognizing that we are moving with the times, both in terms of providing credit whether it is not there, as well as upgrading ourselves to meet the change in the technology and digital world. We are very well positioned going forward. I'd like to thank Business Today once again and look forward for a very good relationship.
Another area where there has been a lot of activity is construction, for which you need cement. Our winner this year is Mr. H.M. Bangur, Managing Director of Kolkata-based Shree Cement.
I am honored to be named the best CEO Cement for 2020 from Business Today. Thank you, Business Today. CEO is as good as its team performs for the company. Our team at Shree Cement is performing at its best possible ability, and that is the reason the company is doing good. Thanks everybody at Shree Cement. Now, the fact remains that every individual will like to perform and contribute maximum for the cause of the company. The problem is related not to him or his motivation, but the company atmosphere somehow doesn't allow the creativity to flourish. CEO's job is to see that his contribution is recognized and he is allowed to perform. For this performance, and if new things are tried, many a times things will go wrong, and a judgment has to be taken. How much risk has to be taken on the individual so that he can try something new without risking much in the company. Here, Shree Cement is one of the most innovative company which tries so many new things. We have the highest rate of failure and highest rate of success. Important is that failure is not labeled on the individual. If it is put on his biodata, then his future creativity is killed, and the new people also understand the rules of the game. So it is very simple that the vision of everyone in the company has to be same, that is to make the company great and a great place to work. Thank you.
Many congratulations, Mr. Bangur. From cement, we head to chemicals. The winner is Mr. D.C. Mehta, CMD of Deepak Nitrite, which has over the past 2 years created additional capacity to cater to rising global demand.
I'm truly honored to receive this Business Today award in recognition for Deepak Nitrite. This has been a very opportune time for Deepak, particularly since we are celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. It was in 1970 that my father, Mr. C.K. Mehta, a visionary industrialist, set up Deepak Nitrite here in Baroda. Since then, the company has grown and has become one of the most resilient chemical companies in the country. I do look forward to seeing we crossing many such milestones and ensuring multiple growth over the coming years. At this stage, I would certainly want to profusely thank my team, which has always shown perseverance and passion for growth. I would also like to thank our Editor-in-Chief, Shri Arun Puriji, and Mr. Rajeev Dubey, Editor of Business Today. Thank you very much.
The next category is consumer durables. Our winner this year is Mr. Anil Rai Gupta, CMD of Havells India, who relied on his own resources and an acquisition that is paying off.
Thank you, Business Today, for giving the honor and this award to me. While this award is known as Best CEO of the Year in our category, however, I truly believe in this fact that there is no one person who makes an organization. The organization is built on the strength and the hard work put in by all the stakeholders, whether it is the employees, our channel partners, our business partners, vendors, investors. They all are a part of this award. It is very special for me particularly that this award is being given to us in 2020, whereas we were also the recipients for this award in 2019. It truly reflects the sustained efforts and performance of the entire organization. I thank Business Today once again for giving me this opportunity to accept this award.
Moving on to finance, the winner is a person who is focused on product creation in retail and SME lending. The winner is Mr. Rajeev Jain, CEO and MD, Bajaj Finance. In the FMCG category, the winner is Mr. Suresh Narayanan, CMD, NSE India. This is the second straight year with Mr. Narayanan bagging the award for India's best CEO in the FMCG category.
To receive the best CEO in the FMCG category for the year 2020, I take this opportunity to thank the distinguished jury and Business Today for conferring this honor on me. More than me, this is an honor for Nestle India and recognizes the commitment, the passion and the pride of over 7,000 employees of this company. It is also a matter of honor that we have figured in the 2019 and the 2020 awards in this category. Thank you all once again and look forward to committing ourselves even more to the consumer in the period 2021 and beyond.
Moving on to the IT and ITES sector, the winner is one who has transformed the company with focus on products and services. The winner is Mr. C. Vijay Kumar, CEO, HCL Technologies.
My sincere gratitude to the eminent jury and the Business Today team for this recognition. I accept it on behalf of 150,000 plus HCLites all over the world who are the true recipients of this award. 2020 had been a most unusual year, and amidst all this uncertainty, loss, healing and hope, the HCL family persevered to help millions stay connected, empowered and enabled through technology against all odds. Our industry-leading performance this year, especially a tough year like this, has been important. But what is even more important is the amazing work that we have collectively done on the front lines of the global pandemic. For this and more, I am very proud of the HCL family, and it is to them I dedicate this award. Once again, I thank the Honorable Jury and the Business Today team for this award.
Moving on to our next category, in oil and gas, we have a new winner. It is Mr. Sanjeev Kumar, Managing Director of state-owned Gujarat Gas, that has built a gas pipeline backbone across Gujarat.
Namaskar. I am deeply honored and humbled to receive this prestigious award. I would like to thank the respectable chief guest, the founder chairman of the India Today Group, Mr. Arun Puri, and the editor of Business Today. I also extend my immense gratitude to respected jury members for selecting me for this esteemed award. Honestly, I am just following a path envisioned more than a decade ago by our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi, who was then Chief Minister, of making Gujarat a natural gas-based economy, an economy for a greener and cleaner society. This very vision is being successfully carried forward by our current Chief Minister, Honorable Shri Vijay Rupani. Here, I would like to add that this could not have been possible without the support of the wonderful team I have at Gujarat Gas, who has been working relentlessly during the entire period of lockdown to ensure that 4,000 plus industries are supplied with cleaner energy, so as there is no shortage of essential supplies, to ensure that besides our 15 lakh household customers, those small houses in 1,000 plus tribal and rural villages we service are supplied with piped gas round the clock, so that they don't have to venture out for their feedstock, to ensure that over 100 plus crematoriums are provided with free and uninterrupted gas during such a testing time. It is now our responsibility to take this vision to national level as we expand our network in 5 states. Finally, I would like to thank our chairman, Sri Anil Murkim, who empowered me to take my decisions independently and extended his valuable guidance whenever required. Once again, thank you to all.
Moving on to our next category, pharma and healthcare. The winner is someone who's focused all along on profitability. Mr. Premchand Godha, CMD of IPCA Laboratories. Moving on to the power sector, like in most other years, the Best CEO award in power goes to a public sector undertaking. The winner this time around is Gurdeep Singh, CMD of NTPC, who is working on moving the thermal power company to a green power entity. Moving on now to the 4 overall awards based on size. We start off with emerging companies. Those are with revenues of up to 10,000 crores. The winner here is Mr. Ashish Bharatram, MD SRF, who has over the years steered the company from technical textiles to chemicals and packaging.
Let me first start by thanking the editorial team at Business Today for having conferred on me this honor. It is indeed a privilege, and I'm most humbled by this. On behalf of the 7,000 odd employees at SRF, I humbly accept this award. This is an award which is a manifestation of the immense teamwork, the dedication, and the hard work put in by each and every one of these employees in transforming SRF over the past 15 years from what I would have called a staid commodity company to much more of a technology and innovation-oriented company. And the kudos go to them. I am just the messenger who carries the award for them. I think when I got into the top role 14 years ago, I was very fortunate to inherit a legacy where we had a strong culture of trust, empowerment, and teamwork. I've always believed that culture is very difficult to create. It is what exists in an organization, and I have to thank my father for having created this right from the very beginning in SRF. It became much easier as a result for both my brother and me to take his legacy forward and build upon it. And I think a lot of credit goes to what we inherited. I think the strategic transformation that we've managed to make over the past 15 years is a credit to the fantastic team that we have at the top, people who understood our vision and understood that for India to compete on the global platform, we need to have a differentiating factor. In our case, we made technology and innovation the key factor around which we were going to transform the company. And I think the fact that I'm standing here today receiving this award is a representation of the fact that we've probably succeeded at what we set out to do. Having said that, I think there's still a long journey ahead of us. We believe we're only at the cusp of what an Indian company can achieve. We still have many miles to go before we sleep. I would like to once again thank all my colleagues at SRF for all the work that they've put in making SRF what it is today. I would also like to thank my fellow nominees and awardees for their success. I think collectively we have a lot to do to make India a name to reckon with. Thank you once again.
We now head to the medium-sized companies. These are those with revenues between 10,000 crores and 50,000 crores. The winner here is Mr. Sanjeev Mehta, CMD, Hindustan Unilever, who has controlled costs to thrive in the marketplace.
I would like to thank Business Today for this recognition, and we accept this recognition with a lot of pride, a lot of joy, and a lot of humility. But I want to dedicate this recognition to our frontline workers, people in our factories, people who have been working and toiling on the front line, ensuring that our goods, which have been so essential to thwart the pandemic, like soaps, the sanitizers, disinfectants, foods, and nutrition products, are distributed across the length and breadth of the country. So we owe our gratitude to them, and I dedicate this recognition to them.
Next is the large companies. These are those between 50,000 crores to 100,000 crores. And the winner here is Mr. Kenchi Ayukawa, MD and CEO of Maruti Suzuki India, the country's biggest car maker, who ensured the market leader stayed ahead of the peers.
I am delighted to receive this recognition on behalf of all employees of Maruti Suzuki. What we achieve in this tough business environment is only because each employee has dedicated himself to the company's vision to bring value to its stakeholder. This award also recognizes the effort of all business partners, such as supplier and dealer and so on, who bring strength to Team Maruti Suzuki. As I humbly receive this award on behalf of Team Maruti Suzuki, I thank you, the jury member, for this honor. Thank you very much.
Next is super large companies with revenues of over 100,000 crores. The winner this time around is Mr. Rajesh Gopinathan, MD and CEO of TCS, who integrated automation products to create machine-first delivery model.
It's my honor to accept this award from Business Today. Coming as it does at the end of a very challenging year, this recognition is extra special, and it's a true testament to the focus and innovativeness of all my friends and colleagues at TCS, who have converted this challenge into opportunity for themselves, for our customers, and for all our stakeholders. It's also extra special for us to dedicate this award to Mr. F.C. Kohli, our founding CEO, who we sadly lost a few days ago. His pioneering spirit shines bright in all the success that TCS continues to enjoy even today. Awards like this will spur us further to continue on this journey to build a purpose-led, adaptable, resilient organization that will put true commitment to all the opportunities that we get and drive transformation for our customers and all our stakeholders. Thank you once again.
We now head to the two biggest awards. The Champion of Champions Award goes to none other than Mr. Mukesh Ambani, CMD, Reliance Industries, who built 3 sector-dominating businesses while paying off debts. And the Lifetime Achievement Award goes to Mr. K.V. Kamath, who used tech to transform Indian banking, steered Infosys past its biggest crisis, and scale up the National Development Bank.
Let me thank Business Today, a member of its jury, for honoring me. Whatever I've done with the support of teams. In all my jobs, I think the credit for anything that has been achieved rightfully goes firstly to the teams. I was at best the catalyst. And of course, credit goes to the family, my wife, for managing me as I managed the enterprises throughout all these years and making sure that I performed at peak performance. Thank you, Business Today. I'm honored. And this is a pleasant surprise coming back after 5 years and you're having recognized me. Thank you very much.
Many congratulations to all the winners who make India proud. With that, we conclude this first virtual edition of BT Mind Rush. We'd like to thank our sponsors once again. Presenting sponsor SRM University, conglomerate partner Darwin Platform Group of Companies, healthcare partner ThyroCare.
ThyroCare, the trust, the truth.